From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Phineas Crane.
How are you, Mr. Crane?
Highly perturbed, sir.
Now, what's bothering you?
My generation used to call it conscience. I want to talk to you, Mr. Dollar.
Well, that's quite a change, isn't it, from your attitude last night?
There have been a number of changes since last night. I can't bear the thought of that girl being imprisoned.
She doesn't like it too much herself. All right, what's on your mind?
I'd prefer not to discuss it over the telephone.
Then you'll have to hold your horses. I'm waiting here for a call from Hartford and some information from the police.
It might be the same information I'm ready to give you, sir.
I don't think so. You should have talked last night, Mr. Crane. I might have been willing then to make a deal of some kind.
And now?
No deal. I can guess what happened to the necklace. And as far as the rest of it's concerned, I never make deals on murder.
Tonight, and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar, location Cranesburg, Ohio. To the Home Office, Tri-State Guarantee Company, Hartford, Connecticut. Assignment, the Cranesburg Matter. Expense account, final page. Item 13, $28.65. Phone calls to Cincinnati and Cleveland, and 2 prepaid calls to Hartford. The wheels were spinning now, and I spent most of the day just sitting back and waiting. Toward late afternoon, Police Chief Ed Durham phoned. Then Hartford, and then Durham again. And finally, the 3 black bars dropped into place. And the payoff was jackpot. Item 14, $10.50, second day's rental on hired car. I left the hotel just before dark and drove out through the north edge of town to the Crane estate. When I'd gone out there the day before, I'd been mostly guessing, playing hunches. But this time I knew pretty much what I wanted and just how to go about getting it. I thought the place deserted as I walked up the long arbor from the carriage house. But as I stepped out onto the terrace, I realized I was wrong.
Mr. Dollar, over here. In here, please. Hurry.
Why all the secrecy, Mr. Crane?
I wanted to talk to you alone. I rather doubted whether I would be able to if it were known that you were here.
Able to or permitted to?
Well, that's what I meant, sir. Permitted.
Who would stop you, Mr. Crane?
Well, that, you might say, is part of the story. The story I didn't tell you last night.
Why not? Why didn't you tell me?
I still thought then I might be able to save things.
And you don't think so now?
I'm afraid not. It's too late. You know too much about it now.
What were you doing in Smiley Pearl's room when I found you last night?
Looking for the necklace. I told you that.
Did you know then he'd been murdered?
No. I wouldn't have had the nerve to go there if I had. And there wouldn't be of any use of going. That's when I realized it was all over. When I heard Mr. Prell had been killed. Dishonesty is one thing, but murder is something else again.
You're so right.
Well, of course, it wasn't dishonest at first. It was all quite legal in the beginning.
But not later.
No, not later. I was against that. Not that I'm claiming any virtue for it. Probably it was just cowardice. Mr. Dollar, be as easy on her as you can.
I'm afraid it won't be in my hands.
I suppose not. These things are always done so impersonally by institutions created for that purpose. Rightfully, no doubt. But one occasionally wonders.
There's something I wonder about sometimes, Mr. Crane.
You refer to?
Human greed.
That's true. There's no real excuse for us, my niece and me. Reasons, yes. An inherited social position and way of life, and declining wealth to support them. We're soft people, Mr. Dollar, and when life gets hard, we look for a soft way out.
And that usually turns out to be the hard way.
She'll find it so, I imagine. For me, it doesn't really matter anymore.
How did you get onto Smiley Prell? How did you know he was the one who robbed your safe?
I was just guessing, until you told me yesterday that he was a professional jewel thief. and that he'd phoned the insurance company and claimed to have the necklace.
But before that, when you were guessing, how did you know about him? What reason did you have to guess?
I'd seen him hanging around the estate here twice, the week before the robbery and when I saw him again afterward, talking to his contact, I guess you'd call it.
His employer fits the facts better.
I suppose so. Anyway, I put two and two together, and I followed Prell. I found out where he lived.
Did the employer know you'd done this?
No, hardly. Or I doubt that I'd be sitting here talking to you. Oh, not that it matters, since you probably know more of the details than I do.
All right, Uncle Phineas. That's quite enough.
Melba.
That was a very quiet entrance, Miss Crane.
It wasn't intentional. I didn't know you were here until I heard voices. Uncle Phineas, would you mind leaving us alone?
It's too late, my dear. I think time is about to run out on all of us.
Aided a great deal, I presume, by some of your more senile imaginings.
Mr. Dollar didn't really need any help.
Please.
Very well, my dear. Leave the two of you, then, to what I anticipate may be rather stormy.
What were you doing? Pumping him? Trying to make him say things you could twist later and use against him?
No, it was more a matter of humoring him, I'd say. What's the matter, Melba? Hangover from last night?
I suppose you told him that, too. That I came to your hotel to see you.
No, didn't seem relevant somehow.
I see.
Where's your fiancé?
Dean?
Sure. How many have you got?
Mr. Sellers is in the billiard room. Why? What do you want with him?
Oh, I need just a few more facts to fill out the picture. I think he can supply them, that's all.
What facts? Why have you come here?
Uncle Phineas invited me.
What for?
He said something about wanting to clear his conscience.
His mind wanders. You know that. You can't rely on anything he says.
I'm not.
What about the girl they arrested?
Your maid, Betty?
Yes, Betty. If the police are satisfied she's guilty, why aren't you?
Because I was hired to find a pearl necklace that was stolen from your safe. It was insured for $20,000, remember? And I haven't found it yet.
Suppose I were to withdraw the insurance claim.
It's a little too late. The police would want to know why.
Why? Simply because I choose to. Because I don't want any more fuss about it. It's not a loss, actually. The necklace was a gift.
Oh, yes, I know. An engagement present of great sentimental value from that wealthy young philanderer, Mr. Dean Sellers, who incidentally is broker than you are.
What?
Yeah. Got a complete rundown on him from Hartford late this afternoon.
I don't believe it.
It's quite a shock, I imagine.
You'd say anything just to help that girl get out of jail.
Ah, you got me mixed up with Sellers, haven't you? He's the one who rallied to her defense.
You cheap little flirt. I hope they convict her.
Do you really believe she's the reason Sellers broke off your engagement?
It wasn't broken off. It was only postponed.
Well, it's like I said, Melba. A lot of surprises. By the way, I'd like to search Betty's room if you don't mind. That's actually why I came out here.
What for?
That necklace. I was hired to recover it, remember?
But if you think she's innocent, then why do you bother?
How do you know what I think? I haven't really said, have I?
No. That's true. That's quite true.
Lucky shot, Mr. Dollar. You got two on the break.
Yeah. Result of a misspent youth. All right. 4-ball in the corner pocket.
Expert, huh?
Oh, just lucky, like you said. Oh, by the way, Mr. Sellers, you were right about Betty. She isn't guilty. She was being framed.
I told you so.
Yeah, she was just an innocent bystander, you might say. Even though I did find the necklace a few minutes ago, hidden in her room.
You found it? Good.
The Cranes, though, aren't quite so innocent.
The Cranes?
No. 9-ball on the far side pocket.
What do you mean about the Cranes?
They were broke, and they needed money to keep up a front. When you came to town and showed an interest in Melba, they figured you were the answer.
Why, you're making Melba sound pretty cold-blooded, you know.
Oh, there was no love lost. You were playing the same game.
Huh?
Sure, Sellers. That's the way you've always operated. Your last wife was a wealthy widow in Miami, Florida. You stayed with her for a year and a half and took her for $150,000. And all that was left of it when you came here was the $20,000 you had invested in the pearl necklace. That was your stake, and that's the way you used it, to convince Melba Crane you weren't a fortune hunter. 12-ball in the far corner.
Dollar, where did you get all this information?
Police records. Then about a month ago, you broke off your engagement with Melba Crane. Why?
Because I was in love with Betty.
You were playing Betty for a pigeon. You backed out because you'd finally discovered that the Cranes were flat broke.
I wasn't after Melba's money.
Sure you were. But you wanted to get out without losing your investment, that necklace. So you brought in Smiley Prell to steal it for you.
I never saw Prell in my life.
Uncle Phineas saw the two of you together a couple of days after the robbery.
Well, he's lying.
So Prell pulled the robbery. And then he told you the pearls he'd stolen were phony. You accused him of double-crossing you. He thought you were double-crossing him. Net result, he got sore and tried for a deal with the insurance company. That's why you killed him.
Are you accusing me of murder?
That's right, Sellers. 8-ball in the end pocket. Who else, Sellers? Betty wasn't in it, except that you tried to frame her. And both the Cranes knew the pearls were imitation. You were the only one who didn't.
They weren't imitations. I paid $20,000 for that necklace.
Not for this one. Melba sold the necklace a month after you gave it to her. They've been living on the money. She had this copy made in Cincinnati.
Why, that cheap little crook.
So the pearls you killed Smiley for and then planted upstairs in Betty's room are worth about $200 at the most. Something to think about, isn't it?
That's right, Dollar. And so is this.
That's a losing game, too, Sellers.
It will be for you if you try to make a move.
Shoot it out with the police. Is that your answer?
If it comes to that. At least I know how to use a gun. Smiley Prell could tell you.
Did you steal this one from Uncle Phineas, too?
No. This one's my own. Now put down that pool cue and get your hands up. Slow and easy. When I go out of here...
Dean, what are you doing with that?
Thanks, Melba.
What have you done, Mr. Dollar?
Nothing. It's going to make him feel very happy for the next day or so. A pool cue makes a pretty handy weapon.
Why? What was he doing with that gun?
Surprise number one. Your fiancé is the lad who had your necklace stolen, and then later killed his partner.
Dean?
Oh, that's probably the chief of police. He was coming out to meet me. You want to let him in?
Murderer. And I was going to marry him.
Yeah, I guess murder is a lot worse than fraud.
What do you mean?
You filed an insurance claim on a necklace you'd already sold. I imagine the company will want to prosecute.
I didn't know what I was doing.
You sure didn't, anywhere along the line. You were marrying Dean Sellers for the money he didn't have. And at the same time, he was trying to marry you for the money you didn't have. Too bad it didn't work out. You two were made for each other. The police are getting impatient, Miss Crane. Expense account item 15, $186.25. Incidentals in Cranesburg and transportation back to Hartford. Expense account total $409.10. End of account, end of report. Under separate cover, I am forwarding one necklace consisting of 38 pearls, all imitation. Approximate value $200, along with my sincere condolences. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Now, here's our star to tell you about next week's story.
Next week, the curse of an ancient king and how it affected the lives and deaths of two people. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. Written by Les Crutchfield, it is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone. Heard in this week's cast were Howard McNear, Forrest Lewis, Paul Richards, Mary Jane Croft, Virginia Gregg, James McCallion, Shirley Mitchell, and Russ Thorson. Musical supervision by Amerigo Marino. Be sure to join us on Monday night, same time and station, for another exciting story of yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Roy Rowan speaking. From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
Jimmy Sayer at Inter-Allied Life, Johnny.
Oh, hi, Jim. How are you?
The way I feel now, the way I'm going to feel, depends on you.
Okay, let's have it.
Remember a guy named King Tut?
The Egyptian mummy they dug out of a tomb full of treasure a few years ago.
That's right.
Well, don't tell me you held a policy on him now, Jim.
Seriously now. You'll also remember there was supposed to be a curse on anybody who molested his tomb.
Yeah, supposed to be. But of course anybody knows that stuff's a lot of malarkey.
Is it?
Isn't it?
Better reserve judgment, Johnny, until you hear about the curse of Kamashek.
Tonight, and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to the Inter-Allied Life Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut. Following is an account of expenditures during my investigation of the curse of Kamashek matter. Expense account item 1, $1 even. Taxi to the office of Inter-Allied Life to talk with Jim Sayer. The conference was brief and not very enlightening.
I'd much rather have you see Mr. Turnbull and get the story from him yourself. As I said in the beginning, he's a very important client. What's more to the point, he can tell you about it much better than I can.
Jim, to coin a cliche, you're being just as clear as mud.
Also, by the way, he specifically asked for you.
Oh, how come?
Well, it seems he liked the way you handled the Parkinson case a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah, Emily Parkinson, the widow who died.
Yeah, that's the one. She was his sister. And, well, go down and see him, Johnny. I honestly can't tell you anything more than I already have about the thing.
James, you have told me nothing.
But he can, and you can pick up a nice fee on it. As a favor to me.
No, for that nice fee. Jim promised to phone Eric Turnbull that I was on my way, and I ran up items 2 and 3, $4.20 for a quick lunch and train fare to Stamford. There I was met by a chauffeured car and driven to Turnbull's house. Far out of the town on Birchbrook Road, it was set on one of the biggest, most beautifully landscaped pieces of property I'd ever seen. The fine old home looked as though it had stood there in all its straight-laced dignity for 100 years. And stolid against the changing world would stand for another 100. In sharp contrast, a lithe, clean Studebaker Golden Hawk was parked in the sweeping driveway at the front. Haskins, the chauffeur, had explained on the way that he doubled as butler, so I wasn't particularly surprised when he opened the door for me.
Since you received a call about your coming, sir, you are to go right in while I take the motor car to the garage. Unless...
He glanced at the Golden Hawk quickly, back of me, then, having left the word unless hanging in midair, climbed back behind the wheel and drove off. Well, he said go right in. Inside, the house was a classic. From the tile-floored reception room with its walls of oak and broad staircase leading to the second floor, I could look into the huge living room, finished in polished mahogany, with a leaded glass window at one side and thick oriental rugs on the floor. A fireplace that seemed to take in a whole wall. Fine mahogany furniture that glowed with a beautiful patina. Beyond that, I could see the library, golden and walnuts. And sitting at a broad desk was a man, his face red with anger, shaking his fist at a very attractive girl of 22 or 3 who stood before him, obviously distressed by what was going on.
Don't call me Uncle Eric. I'm not your uncle now, and by heaven, if I have my way, I never will be. You're not married to him yet, my girl, and if I have anything to say about it, you... Oh, Mr. Dollar, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Mr. Turnbull?
Well, that's right. Come in. And Dorothy, Mr. Dollar and I wish to be alone.
The girl stood there for a brief moment, looking at the man with an expression of utter futility in her face. Then, without so much as a glance at me, turned and left by the door that I had just entered.
Come in, Mr. Dollar. Come in, please.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about this. Somewhat embarrassing to you, I'm sure, but it's something I'll have to tell you about later. Sit down, please.
Thanks.
May I pour you a drink? I must confess I feel I could use one at the moment.
No, thanks, Mr. Turnbull. I think I'll pass.
I suppose it is a little early, but, well, good luck. Now,
Jim Sayer in Inner Allied tells me you have an insurance problem.
Actually, not yet. I'll be perfectly frank with you, Mr. Dollar.
Please do.
I'm asking you to help me not as an insurance investigator, but as a man I feel I can trust.
But you don't really know me, Mr. Turnbull.
Oh, on the contrary, I do very well. As a result of your handling of the case of my widowed sister Emily when she died a few years ago. As a matter of fact, you and I met very briefly at the time.
Oh, yeah, of course, Emily Parkinson. The case involved a lot of phony relatives who filed claims on her estate.
Yes, that's right. And your clever trapping of those false claimants and their cheap attempts to gain part of Emily's fortune was... I understand that several of them are still serving sentences.
Yeah, I believe so.
Which is quite what they deserve. If there's anything I detest in this world, it's dishonesty.
Well, I guess most of us feel that way about it.
Of course we do, if we have any shred of human dignity.
Yeah. But now, what is your problem?
It concerns Donald, Emily's son, my nephew. I had expected him to arrive here before you, but suppose I go ahead anyway.
Go ahead.
Well, when her husband died, Emily was left with a considerable estate and their only child, Donald. The estate's worth nearly $1 million now.
Mm-hmm.
With not too many years ahead of her, she wasn't well. She had lavished everything on the boy, the best of private schools, travel to Europe, all the things that befit one of our social and financial status. Before she died, she carefully put all of the money into a trust for Donald, a rather unique arrangement which I control until he reaches the age of 30.
What would happen if he didn't survive you? Would it all pass to you?
Yes. But of course I have no particular need of it. When I sold Turnbull Enterprises some years ago, I think you can see that I'm pretty well fixed. Investments, you know.
Yeah.
At any rate, since his mother died, Donald has been living here with me in accordance with her request that I care for him. And I've been glad to do it, for I love the boy very dearly.
How old is he, by the way?
25. He'll be 26 in October.
And what's he doing for a living?
That's the whole point. There's no need for him to work for a living, as you put it. But in college, against my better judgment, he majored in archaeology and Egyptology.
What did you want him to study?
Business and finance, of course. Forgive me for being so blunt, Dollar, but I see no sense whatsoever in his taking the fortune that his father spent so many years building up and squandering it on a lot of... Oh, Donald, come in.
I received word at the club you wished to see me, Uncle Eric. What is it this... Oh.
Mr. Dollar, this is my nephew, Donald Cronin.
How do you do, Mr.
Hi,
Dollar?
Donald.
We've been talking about you, Donald.
Oh?
As a result of a newspaper item I just read, to the effect that you're preparing for another expedition.
That's right, sir. I'm going to the ancient city of Thebes, in Egypt.
Egypt?
Since my trip last fall, I've done a lot of reading and research in New York and London. I'm convinced I've located the ancient tomb of the pharaoh Kamashek. An advance party's already begun excavation. I'll join them there.
Do you realize the cost of this thing?
Uncle Eric, it promises to be one of the most important archaeological finds of the century.
You mean it might be if I let you go?
If you let me go? Uncle Eric, perhaps Mr. Dollar...
Mr. Dollar can hear anything I have to say to you. You see, Dollar, we're finally getting to the point.
Yeah.
Donald, I'll make no bones about it. I'm quite fed up with your wasting your time on these stupid, pointless expeditions.
That's not the way the museum feels about them, sir.
Well, that's the way I feel about them.
Wait, sir, please. Donald, isn't that your collection from Yucatan that the museum recently acquired?
Why, yes, sir. My party and I were able to...
I'm sure we don't care about your party and you. You're not only wasting your time, but your money. The money your father struggled an entire lifetime to gain.
That money was left for me to spend in any way I see fit.
Provided your handling of it meets my approval. When you're 30 and the estate passes completely into your hands, you can do anything you like with it. Buy the Brooklyn Bridge if you want. You probably will. But until then, I am legally in control of it. And now, finally, I have every intention of exercising that control. At least to the extent of seeing you don't squander any more of it on these foolhardy expeditions.
I take it you've made several, Donald.
Yes, sir, and he's opposed me in all of them.
Because sooner or later you've got to learn that as the wealthy son of a family, it's up to you to carry on the tradition that's been set for you. To increase the fortune that's part of your family name, build even greater financial power, not to throw it away.
Do you call my contributions to science and history a waste of money?
Oh, now look, my boy, there's nothing selfish about my attitude in this matter. I'm thinking only of you and your future. The family name that you alone are left to uphold.
Well...
Why don't you give up this asinine idea of going to Egypt?
No, sir.
What do you mean, no? Let me finish.
There's no point in your saying any more, Uncle. I'm going to explore the tomb of Kamashek.
Now listen here,
I've made all the arrangements, obtained the sponsorship of the museum, notified the universities that are interested in my work.
I say you're not going.
And I say I am, sir.
You young fool. Don't you realize that I'm in a position to cut you off without a penny?
If you think I care, Uncle Eric, you're crazy.
Then by heaven I will. So help me, Donald, I've tried to avoid this kind of situation, but you and your idiotic bullheadedness, your utter disregard for the responsibility and importance of your family, social status have made it inevitable. Now it's come in spite of all I've tried to do, and by heaven I'll cut you off without a... Wait a minute. Donald, where are you going?
Egypt.
In the moment or two before Eric Turnbull recovered his poise enough to speak to me, my mind raced. This whole situation offered a big flock of wild possibilities. Obviously, the two were at sword points, had been for some time. Apparently, and I began to wonder about this, Turnbull had no need of Donald's money. Yet he seemed determined to keep him from spending it. And on what looked to me like a very worthy expedition. If Donald died, Turnbull had said, the estate would pass to him. Oh, and something else I wanted to find out about. The girl who'd been there when I arrived. But why? Why did I want to know or need any answers? What could this whole affair possibly have meant to me? I'm no family counselor. I guess I spoke that thought out loud. I'm an insurance investigator.
Yes, Dollar. Which is another reason why I need your help in this affair.
But I just don't see it, Mr. Turnbull.
I'm afraid I must apologize for that little scene a moment ago.
Well, there's no need to. It was interesting, to say the least.
Well, we didn't touch on the one thing that I wanted you to know about. That girl, Dorothy Harkness, his so-called fiancée.
Oh.
Thanks to a generous allowance, plus fees from the museum and some of the universities, Donald's insured his life for $100,000. $50,000 for the museum, and a like amount for the girl.
Through Inter-Allied?
Yes. I'll put it to you bluntly. She has prodded him to go on these expeditions, and I believe she somehow hopes to engineer his death during this Kamashek project in order to collect on that policy. Do I make myself clear?
If anything was clear about this situation, I certainly couldn't see it. More things had come flying at me from out of left field during the past half hour than I could cope with. And I wanted time to organize some kind of thinking. So I used a corny old device, glanced at my watch, said something about being late for an appointment back in Hartford. I apologized, promised to talk with him again tomorrow when there'd be more time. Haskins drove me back to the station and courteously waited until the train pulled in, then left. And it was then I noticed the little Studebaker Golden Hawk that I'd seen at the house pull up beside the platform, and the girl, Dorothy Harkness, jumped out and ran over to me.
Mr. Dollar, I had to wait for Haskins to leave so he wouldn't see me.
Oh?
I must talk to you. Please call me. Here's the number.
Is this about Donald?
Yes, because of the danger he's in.
For Mr. Turnbull?
No, and you must believe me. From the curse of Kamashek.
Now, here's our star to tell you about tomorrow's episode of this week's story.
Tomorrow, a little order starts to come out of the Department of Utter Confusion, and a promise of murder. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. It is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone, who also wrote this week's story. Be sure to join us tomorrow night, same time and station, for the next exciting episode of Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Roy Rowan speaking. From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
I have your call to Stanford, sir.
Oh, thank you, operator. Hello?
Oh, Mr.
Dollar, I'm so glad you've called.
Well, you seem pretty anxious to talk about something, Miss Harkness.
I am. About Donald and his uncle. And Donald's plan for the expedition to Egypt.
To dig up the remains of the old pharaoh Kamashek?
Yes. Can you come over here to see me, please?
Well, when I talked to you on the station platform a while ago, you said something about the curse of Kamashek.
Yes, Mr. Dollar.
Isn't that nothing more nor less than superstition?
No.
Huh?
I'm afraid that in this case, Mr. Dollar, it can mean nothing more nor less than murder.
I'll take the first train.
Tonight, and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Inter-Allied Life Insurance Company, Crutchfield Square, Hartford, Connecticut. Assignment, The Curse of Kamashek Matter. Expense account continued. Item 4, 320, cab to the station, train fare from Hartford to Stamford, and cab to the modest but attractive apartment of Dorothy Harkness. The short trip gave me time to think. Eric Turnbull, wealthy retired businessman, called me in on this case. Turnbull, uncle of young Donald Cronin, entirely in control of a large trust fund for the boy. Turnbull, who was determined to prevent him from making an expedition to the tomb of Kamashek, on the excuse that he suspected a plot against the boy's life, engineered by Dorothy Harkness, who was not only Donald's fiancée, but a beneficiary of his $100,000 life policy. So a talk with Dorothy Harkness seemed very much in order.
Oh, come in, Mr. Dollar. I'm so glad you were willing to come and talk with me.
How are you, Miss Harkness?
You make me sound so old. It's Dorothy. Won't you sit down?
All right. Thank you. But before we go any further, Dorothy, I think you ought to understand that I'm an insurance investigator, and so far...
I know that. Donald told me his uncle was going to send for you.
But there's been no claim filed, no reason for one.
I know. Mr. Turnbull does, well, kind of unusual things now and then, and I guess this is one of them.
Unless he's trying to prevent whatever might cause a claim to be filed.
Mr. Dollar, I don't know what Mr. Turnbull has told you about me, but I'm sure it wasn't good. I'm afraid we don't get along very well.
Well, it's pretty obvious he doesn't like your interest in his nephew, Donald.
I've known Donald since school, Mr. Dollar, and we hope to get married. At least Donald does.
Oh? And what about you?
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
I got the impression from Mr. Turnbull you were doing a pretty good job of getting Donald into your clutches.
But that isn't the way it is at all. We've been seeing a great deal of each other, and Donald has asked me to marry him. And I'm fond of him, Mr. Dollar, terribly fond of him. But so far as marriage is concerned, I'm not sure.
What do you mean?
I can't help wondering all the time if he isn't hoping to marry me just as an escape from his uncle.
Uh-huh. Would you marry him?
If I was sure of him.
You'd be sure of an awful lot of money, Dorothy.
What?
The minute he reached 30, that is.
Mr. Turnbull has poisoned your mind, Mr. Dollar. What money Donald has or may have has nothing to do with it. That sort of thinking is filthy.
I guess you mean that, don't you, Dorothy?
Yes. I think I've loved Donald ever since my father brought him into the museum.
Your father?
Yes, he's curator of archaeology.
Well, how does he feel about Donald and you?
His only interest in Donald is in the money, the financial support he gives the museum.
Oh.
Since Mother died, he's become a grasping, self-centered old man whose only interest is in the museum.
I see.
So I don't live with him anymore.
Well, then I take it he opposes any thought of your marrying Donald.
He wants me to string him along for his money and scientific contributions. But Donald is making something of himself. Instead of wasting his life in idle luxuries, Mr. Turnbull would have it.
Or would he rather have Don increase the family fortune?
No, just not spend it. That's all he cares about. So if anything should happen to Donald, there would be more left for Mr. Eric Turnbull. And that's why I called you. Because I'm afraid that if Donald does go on this expedition to Egypt, something will happen to him.
Oh, now, wait a minute. Turnbull has objected strenuously to this latest expedition.
You don't know them yet. Either of them. They're of the same stock, and they're both stubborn, determined, and willful, and his uncle is clever. Clever enough to play on this stubbornness, capitalize on it.
What's that supposed to mean?
He knows that the surest way to keep Donald from doing something is to insist that he do it. It's always been that way.
Are you sure you haven't been reading too much psychology?
It's true. And in spite of Donald's academic maturity, he's almost like a child in some things, emotional sometimes. That's another reason why I wonder if Donald really wants to marry me. If he loves me enough. Or if he's simply rebelling against his uncle.
You feel, then, that Mr. Turnbull is opposing the expedition to be sure that Donald will make it?
Yes. Because he doesn't quietly reason with Donald, talk things out. He shouts, he storms, he threatens.
And that gets Don's back hair up, huh?
It makes him more determined to go than ever. Wouldn't it do the same to you?
Maybe so.
And I'm afraid that if he does go, he'll never come back.
You honestly don't want him to go?
No.
Just what do you think might happen to him? This curse of Kamashek you mentioned?
I think that would be the excuse for his uncle to have something happen to him.
Well, what is this curse?
Do you remember King Tutankhamun?
Well, I remember hearing and reading something about him, old Egyptian pharaoh.
His tomb had a curse on it, too. But because they believed it would yield important historical data and some of the treasure of those ancient dynasties, an expedition went to the Valley of the Kings and excavated it anyhow.
You're really hip on this stuff, aren't you?
Because of Donald's interest in it, I guess. But listen to me. One after another, people who were involved in that expedition died under very mysterious circumstances.
Yeah, I remember. Even Lord Carnarvon himself.
They said that he died from the results of a mosquito bite and pneumonia. But the other deaths were not so easily explained away. Not even by able scientists and doctors.
You believe in the curse of King Tut, then? And now the curse of Kamashek?
No, I don't.
But from what you just told me...
There have been too many other tombs, all bearing warnings, where the people who dug into them, touched the treasures in them, even touched the remains of the kings, had no harm at all come to them.
Well, then I'm afraid I don't see what you're driving at.
This, Johnny. Any mysterious death of someone who's explored one of these ancient tombs will be accepted as a result of the curse. Don't you see? It's an open door to murder.
You know something? To me it all sounds a little far-fetched.
No. Because of Eric Turnbull. Because I'm sure he wants Donald out of the way.
For his money?
This terrible friction between them, this antagonism that's been building up for years. And it's reached a point where either one of them would be glad to see the other out of the way. But Eric Turnbull is the only one who is evil enough to do something about it.
Well, I gotta admit that sparks kind of flew between them when I saw them together.
And don't forget it would be to his uncle's advantage if Donald were to die.
He needs the money?
Well, no, I guess he doesn't.
Well, what about you?
I'm doing all right at the museum. I'm earning enough to live on, and I'm happy in my work.
Just the same as I understand it, you'd collect half of Donald's life policy.
I hate you for even thinking about such a thing. I'd hoped you would help me save Donald's life.
Funny, though, isn't it?
Funny?
Eric Turnbull is my employer in this case. If there really is a case.
Because he's smart. He's clever. He's clever enough to know that calling you in would help cover up anything he might do.
All right, look. Suppose Eric Turnbull did plan to get rid of Donald. How?
I don't know. But this I do know. And it's the thing that has scared me. On his last expedition, and he didn't realize it until afterwards, one of the men in his party, a man he'd selected himself, turned out to have been paid separately by Mr. Turnbull.
Why not? He probably wanted somebody there to look after Donald without his knowing.
Listen to me. This man caused a couple of accidents. At least they called them accidents. That could have cost Donald his life.
Oh, now, Dorothy, look.
No,
please.
no. No, I can see that you don't believe anything I've told you.
Dorothy, I think you're just building up something in your imagination.
You don't believe me. But at least do this. Remember, no matter what happens, remember what I've told you.
Somebody was lying. That was a cinch. But who? And why? Unless one of them really was plotting against the life of Donald Cronin. I couldn't get it out of my head that at least Eric Turnbull didn't need whatever money would come from Donald's death. Dorothy Harkness, on the other hand, would gain what to her would be plenty. Sure, nearly $1 million would go to Turnbull, but that would mean much less to him than the $50,000 insurance would to her. Well, there seemed to be nothing more to say to her at the moment, so I left her, took a cab back to the station. That's item 5, 65 cents, and telephoned to the house on Birchbrook Road in the hope that Donald would be home and I'd have a chance to talk to him.
Hello?
Oh, Mr. Turnbull, this is Johnny Dollar.
Oh, splendid. Where are you?
Well, I'm at the station, but I was calling to try and...
Splendid. Haskins will drive the car down to meet you immediately.
Well, now...
I knew that if you thought it over, you'd be willing to take on this case.
Yeah, sure.
You just wait right there. Haskins will be along in a few minutes. Goodbye.
Come in, Mr. Dollar.
Thank you, but before we talk about this...
Sit down, won't you? Now, from what I've been able to learn, Donald is planning to leave for Egypt immediately. I checked with a friend at the Explorers Club in New York, where the boy's been staying these past few days.
Oh, I thought he always stayed right here with you.
Well, he does, except when he's preparing for an expedition.
Then you are going to let him go.
Well, how can I stop him without making him look foolish in the eyes of his colleagues, the museum, the universities who are so interested in his work? Yes, I have to let him go. But with you beside him there...
Oh, wait a minute.
Of course, I'll expect you to be with him during the entire expedition.
Well, now, look,
Now, remember this. No expense is to be spared in the protection of my nephew's life. I had to go down to New York to see David Wilt. He's my stockbroker, Harris Dillman Company. While I was there, I stopped at my bank and arranged to have some 5,000 in American Express traveler's checks ready for you. All you have to do is go down there and sign them, pick them up. If you need more, cable me.
You don't waste any time, do you?
I know Donald. He's very stubborn, determined, and willful. In his present frame of mind, he might pack up and take off at a moment's notice. I want to be sure you're at his side.
Okay, you're the boss. But, Mr. Turnbull...
Yes?
You still haven't told me why you think his life is in any more danger on this expedition than on any of the others he's undertaken.
Because that girl, Dorothy Harkness, is smart, is clever. And because of something that happened on Donald's last expedition in Yucatan.
Oh?
He didn't realize it until afterwards, but one of the men in his party, a man he'd selected himself, turned out to be a friend of this Dorothy Harkness.
Not 20 minutes ago, I heard exactly...
Now, listen to me. This man caused a couple of accidents. At least they called them accidents. That could have cost Donald his life. And Mr. Dollar, though lacking any proof, I am convinced he was put up to them by the beneficiary of his insurance policy, Dorothy Harkness.
Did I say somebody was lying? Somebody had to be lying. And by now, that old feeling was beginning to come back to me, that hunch, whatever it is, that told me somebody was planning to kill Donald. Eric Turnbull? Dorothy Harkness? Who? Something told me I'd better get to Donald Cronin. But fast.
Now, here's our star to tell you about tomorrow's episode of this week's story.
Tomorrow, suddenly the reason for a carefully planned murder becomes crystal clear. And a race against death becomes a race for my own life. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. It is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone, who also wrote this week's story. Be sure to join us tomorrow night, same time and station, for the next exciting episode of Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Roy Rowan speaking. From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
This is the operator at the Explorers Club.
Oh, good. Have you been able
Sorry, Mr. Dollar, but I haven't been able to reach Mr. Donald Cronin for you.
Well, hasn't he been there at all?
He was in and out all morning, but he refused to answer any calls then. Since you first telephoned, he hasn't been back.
Well, do you know when he will be back?
No, I don't, sir.
All right, then leave a message. I'll meet him there at the club.
Is it very important that you see him, Mr. Dollar?
It's important that I keep him from being murdered.
Tonight and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Inter-Allied Life Insurance Company, Crutchfield Square, Hartford, Connecticut. Assignment, The Curse of Kamashek Matter. Expense account continued. Item 6, $9.80, train to New York, quick lunch and taxi to the Traders Bank and Trust Company. There I picked up the American Express traveler's checks that Eric Turnbull had left in my name, had left for expense money to take me to Egypt, to make sure his nephew Donald Cronin lived safely through an expedition to open the grave of the ancient pharaoh Kamashek. The bank teller's brief remark gave me something to think about.
All signed, Mr. Dollar?
Yep.
Yes, now, let me check the amount for you just once more.
All right.
1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 3,500, 4, 45, 47, 48, $5,000 even. Mm-hmm. Yes, here you are.
Good, thanks.
And as I'm sure Mr. Turnbull knows, this will close out this particular account completely.
I thought about that remark a little later when it began to tie in with some other things I learned. Right now, item 780 cents cab fare to the Explorers Club. Donald had not yet returned, so I left another message for him, asking him to sit tight until he heard from me. And I meant sit tight. Because apparently, after the latest argument with his Uncle Eric, he was quite likely to hop off to Egypt on short notice. This I didn't want. As a matter of fact, at this point, I wasn't sure I approved of his expedition at all. Both his uncle and his girlfriend, Dorothy Harkness, had told me they thought his life was in danger. And each accused the other of plotting his murder. I was about to leave the Explorers Club when I was buttonholed by a short, kind of cute-looking old character in gray striped suit, tattersall vest, spats, believe it or not, and all but a monocle.
I say there, old man.
Yes?
If you'll pardon me, I believe I overheard you inquiring at the desk for Donald Cronin, didn't I?
Oh, yes. Do you know him?
Oh, I most certainly do. But excuse me, I'm Percival Thronghurst Scatterday.
Mr. Scatterday, I'm Johnny Dollar.
Oh, yes. Donald told me that he'd met you at his home. Tell me, do you plan to accompany him on the expedition to Thebes?
Well, yes.
Excellent. It should result, you know, in one of the most important archaeological finds of the century. Think of it. The tomb of Kamashek.
Yes. Do you know where Donald is now?
Treasures, artifacts, and that should put to shame the ones that were excavated from the tomb of Tutankhamun.
Yes, I'm sure it will, but now...
If history has told us the truth about Kamashek, 18th dynasty, I believe...
Well, that I would know. But now, Mr. Scatterday, it's important that I reach Donald Cronin just as soon as...
No. Now that I think of it, Kamashek was 12th dynasty.
Oh, Mr. Scatterday,
But he couldn't be, because that was the era... Oh, yes, I remember now. It was the 18th, the same period in which the great temple of Queen Hatshepsut was erected at Daya el-Bahari at Thebes, of course. You've seen that, of course.
No, I haven't.
Oh, magnificent, enthralling.
Now, look here, sir.
But now, Mr. Dollar...
I've got to reach Donald Cronin, so if you'll excuse me...
Mr. Dollar, please, you say you are going with Donald. You do know about the curse of Kamashek, or do you?
Yes, I've heard of it.
Oh, then you'll certainly arrange not to be present at the opening of the sarcophagus.
Why?
Well, as I'm certain you know, all the preliminary work has been accomplished by the advance party, of course.
So I understand.
The antechamber of the tomb was opened over a month ago.
So?
Well, it simply means that as soon as Donald arrives, they will penetrate to the sepulchral chamber and the sarcophagus itself.
Well?
Mr. Dollar, it was engraved on the stone slab, barring the way to the last chamber, Mantak Ko Fore El, and so on.
What's that supposed to be?
The warning, my boy, the warning that whosoever violate the tomb and desecrate the body of the noble pharaoh by contact therewith shall quickly die.
You don't believe in those things, do you?
Mr. Dollar.
As I always understood it, those warnings were just put there to discourage thieves from robbing those old tombs.
Mr. Dollar, I only ask that you remember what happened to those who violated the tomb of Tutankhamun.
Oh, well, couldn't the deaths of the people who entered that tomb be due simply to coincidence? Or rather, things, circumstances quite apart from their having done so?
Of course they could, but were they? Mr. Dollar, I assure you that if it were not for the warning of the curse of Kamashek, I would be the first to want to enter that tomb. Instead, I have refused to go on the expedition at all. Take care of Donald.
Well, that's what I'm being hired to do.
And of yourself, sir.
Yeah, sure. Now, sorry, but I'm anxious to reach Donald, and you say you've seen him here at the club?
Yes, only last evening. He was here making some of his final preparations.
Well, do you know where he is now?
Yes.
Well, where?
At his uncle's place in Stamford, Connecticut.
You're sure?
As sure as I am that you've not heeded my warning about the curse of Kamashek. But I beg you, Mr. Dollar, for the welfare of Donald Cronin and yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. If this were a mystery story instead of an accounting of expenditures on a case, I'd tag Percy Scatterday as a prime suspect for whatever might happen later. Like the man who tries to throw you off his own trail by suggesting that somebody else is gunning for you. But I decided he was just an old fogey who'd been turned down on the Kamashek expedition, was trying to justify his own shortcomings with the tales about the curse. But you know something? I was wrong. I should have listened to him a little more understandingly. Item 8, 75 cents, taxi to the office of Harrison and Dillman and Company to see David Wilt, the man Eric Turnbull had named as his stockbroker. The reason? The remark the bank teller had made about closing out an account. As it turned out, my timing was perfect.
Sit down, sir, sit down. I'll be with you just as soon as I finish this phone call.
Oh, sure, thanks.
Hello. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting, but someone just stepped into my office.
If you'd rather be left alone, I'll...
No, that's all right. Now, as I started to say, if you dispose of the gold medal mining stock, your holdings will be reduced to practically nothing. Yes, that's right. Well, but Mr.
Look, you're sure you wouldn't rather I come back another time?
Very well. It's just that I hate to see what was once a very strong investment program. Very well, Mr. Turnbull, if you insist.
Turnbull?
Yes. Goodbye. Now, sir.
Eric Turnbull, Mr. Wilt?
Yes, but... Now, just a minute, sir. It was very remiss of me to mention the client's name in front of you, at least under the circumstances. Whatever I may have said on the phone just now was quite confidential.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
I can only ask that you discreetly forget anything you may have heard.
Not by a long shot.
What's this? Who are you, sir? Dollar, I believe the receptionist said.
That's right, Johnny Dollar, insurance investigator. And that conversation told me just what I came here to try to charm you into telling me.
Mr. Dollar, please remember this. That was entirely confidential. None of your business.
Here, my credentials.
Yeah? Well?
Now, you remember something. So far as Eric Turnbull is concerned, my coming here is entirely confidential. None of his business. Goodbye, Mr. Wilt. So the wealthy Eric Turnbull wasn't so wealthy after all. Big investments in the stock market, he'd said. But they didn't look so big anymore. And the closing out of bank accounts. Item 9, 30 cents, phone call to Dorothy Harkness.
Yes, Mr. Dollar?
I just called to tell you, Dorothy, that if it'll be any satisfaction to you, I'm going to make the trip to Egypt.
Oh, thank heaven, then Donald will have some protection against the machinations of his uncle.
Oh, gal, that sounds like a line out of an old melodrama.
I know you don't believe me, Mr. Dollar, but I'm so sure that Eric Turnbull is plotting against Donald's life.
You know something? I'm beginning to feel a little that way, too.
Then you did believe me, in spite of the way you poo-pooed everything I said. Are you and Donald leaving together?
I can't seem to find him. Do you know where he is?
Have you tried the Explorer's
No,
Club?
not there.
Well, he'll surely call me before he leaves.
Well, if he does, have him get in touch with me.
Where, Mr. Dollar?
Right now, I'm going out to Eric Turnbull's house. After that, I'll be back in Hartford. Item 10, $7 even, train fare back to Stamford and taxi to the Turnbull residence, in the hope that there I would find Donald Cronin, the real principal in this case, and the one person I hadn't yet talked to. But it was Eric Turnbull who met me at the door.
Mr. Dollar, I'm glad to see you. Come in. Have you seen my nephew, Donald?
Well, no. Isn't he here?
No, nor is he at the Explorers Club. I've called them several times. I'm worried about him and his present frame of mind.
I'm worried about him, too, Mr. Turnbull, but not for the same reason.
Because of that girl, Dorothy Harkness. Here, sit down.
No, that isn't what I meant.
In his present frame of mind, he's likely to jump off on his flight to Egypt without Look here. I wonder if he's with her.
No, that much I do know.
Oh, I wish to heaven he would call if anything happens
If anything
to that...
happens to him, you'd love it, wouldn't you?
What? What did you say?
I've done a little checking up on you, Mr. Turnbull, since I last talked to you.
What do you mean?
In a case as involved as this, it's necessary to check all the angles, everything, everyone, even the man who hires you.
Has that girl been poisoning your mind against me, too?
Your banker, from whom I picked up the American Express checks, let it slip that your account is in pretty bad shape. Non-existent now, as a matter of fact.
Go on, Mr. Dollar.
And your stockbroker, quite inadvertently, made it all too plain that the big investments you told me about aren't so big after all.
Mr. Dollar...
All right, tie that in with the fact that if anything does happen to Donald, you'll come into his estate.
You've said enough.
But it's true, isn't it? You laid so much stress on Dorothy and the museum getting his $100,000 life insurance, but you're the one who would really benefit by his death.
Dollar, you have talked with one banker, with one stockbroker. Why, in your snooping around, didn't you talk with the others who hold my accounts?
Like who?
It's none of your business. But if what you are implying were true, why in heaven's name would I ever ask you to come in and protect my nephew?
As a cover-up?
I should knock you down with my bare fists, and believe me, my boy, I could do it. Now listen to me.
I'm listening.
If I didn't have any money, how could I afford to give you the $5,000 in expense money, pay whatever other costs may be involved in your employment? And why do you suppose, in spite of this high-handed attitude of yours, I'm still begging you to stay on this case? See Donald, Mr. Dollar, talk with him. You'll find that in spite of the angry scene between us, I'm concerned only with his welfare, that I want to protect him, that I want you to protect him. Wait, that's Donald.
Now, let me take it.
Well, now, just a minute.
Johnny Dollar.
Oh, Mr. Dollar, I was calling Mr. Turnbull.
Mr. Scatterday?
Yes, of the Explorers Club. Mr. Dollar, I've just talked to a couple of fellow members who saw him off.
Saw him? Donald Cronin?
Yes, last night. His plane has probably reached Cairo by now. Fooled all of us, didn't he?
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, thought you'd want to...
Well?
Donald left for Egypt last night.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
Then please, I beg of you, go. In heaven's name, go to him. Stay with him. Protect him.
For a long moment, Eric Turnbull simply stood there, sobbing, pleading with his tear-filled eyes. And suddenly, I don't know why, I found that I believed him. I wish now that he'd been lying. 2 lives might have been saved.
Now, here's our star to tell you about tomorrow's episode of this week's story.
Tomorrow, a flight into darkness, and when day has come, there's blood on the desert sands. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. It is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone, who also wrote this week's story. Be sure to join us tomorrow night, same time and station, for the next exciting episode of Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Roy Rowan speaking. From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
Have you found Donald yet, Mr. Dollar? Have you been... Oh, this is Dorothy Harkness.
Yeah, I know. And no, I haven't found Donald Cronin.
He wasn't at his uncle's place? Johnny, you must find him. Talk to him. Talk him out of making the trip to Egypt.
Dorothy.
If he does, he'll die. His uncle will see to it that he dies.
Look, Dorothy.
You must find him and stop help
I'm afraid it's a little late for that.
What?
He took off on a direct flight to Egypt early yesterday.
Oh, no.
Has at least a 36-hour start, at least.
Johnny, you must go after him.
On the first plane I can get to Cairo.
Tonight, and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Inter-Allied Life Insurance Company, Crutchfield Square, Hartford, Connecticut. Assignment, The Curse of Kamashek Matter. Expense account continued. Item 10. Taxi, train to New York, and cab to the airport. $9.45. Item 11. Round-trip plane fare to Cairo, Egypt. $1,305. I was tired, and the steady drone of the four powerful engines lulled me to sleep in no time. I think I might have slept most of the way to Paris, which was to be our first stop, except for hunger pangs and the appropriate ministrations of a very attractive stewardess. Usually on such a long flight, I try to make friends with everybody aboard, just to shorten the trip. And I did this time, except for one man who sat 4 or 5 seats behind me. He was a rather hefty individual, dark-complexioned, about 30, I'd guess, who didn't budge from his seat during the entire flight. And every time I approached him to pass the time of day, he immediately made like he was asleep. So he wanted to be alone. But when I settled down into my seat, next to a lovely petite brunette named Carolyn, who was... Now, that's beside the point, except for purely personal reasons that I'll pursue further when I get back to the States. The point is that in primping a bit and replenishing her lipstick, she held up a small mirrored compact. And reflected in it, I could see that the dark-complexioned man was not only quite wide awake, but watching me every second of the ride. In a rather strange way, too. Concentrated. Like you'd watch a fly you're planning to swat. And every time I'd turn around, he'd promptly shut his eyes and feign sleep again. Finally, it was early evening, we sat down at Le Bourget, the airport on the outskirts of Paris. Since this was Carolyn's destination, during the short layover, I helped her get her baggage and extracted the promise of a date in New York when she returned in the fall. Yeah, I guess Paris does it to you. Well, anyhow, after she'd piled into a taxi, I wandered around for a bit thinking and decided to reboard the plane, look up the dark, silent passenger, and have it out with him. But apparently I'd waited too long. As I passed a narrow sort of alley beside a baggage shed, he decided to have it out with me.
In here, Dollar, quick.
Huh? What?
In here, where we won't be seen.
Oh, now, just a minute, fella. Who are you? What do you want?
Just this.
What? Why, you don't... All right, now. What was a big idea, mister? You gonna talk, or do you want some more of this?
All right, I'll talk.
Well, who put you up to this? Come on.
No, I can't tell you that.
You want to bet? All right, now start talking. I said...
All right, I'll talk. It was Turnbull.
What? Turnbull?
Yeah, that's right. Frederick Turnbull.
Why?
Oh, should I know? I do a lot of strong arm for him.
Go on.
So he pays me good to get you out of the way, so I should ask questions?
Well, maybe he'll have a few to ask you if you ever get back to the States. Now roll over.
Huh? Hey. All right.
Yeah,
hey, wait. What are you doing? That's my passport.
That's right, mister. That's exactly what it was. When you get back on your feet, you can try to figure out how to go on from here without it.
Listen, you dirty...
Sorry, buddy. I gotta catch a flight. I suppose I should have turned the unfriendly thug over to the French police, but figured he'd have trouble enough lacking a passport to keep him out of my way for a while. The only charges I could make against him would be for assault. Time was of the essence, too. Since Donald Cronin actually was 2 days ahead of me, and it was important that I join him at the tomb of Kamashek as soon as possible. At least so I thought. Until I entered the main building of the airport again and heard my name being called on the PA system. The information desk showed me where to take a transatlantic phone call. Johnny Dollar.
Dollar, this is Eric Turnbull.
Well.
Thank goodness I was able to reach you during your Paris stopover.
I'm glad you did, Mr. Turnbull, because there are a couple of things I want to talk to you about.
When you return, Mr. Dollar.
What's the matter with right now?
And may I suggest that you take the first plane back here that you can get?
First, I want a little explanation for a beating I just took for... Wait a minute. What did you say?
Come back here and we'll settle our accounts. The case is closed.
What?
Donald is dead.
Where? How?
I just received word from one of the members of the expedition.
In Egypt?
Yes, the curse of Kamashek has been fulfilled.
Or was he murdered?
I'm afraid it was the same mysterious death that's overtaken so many who violated those old tombs.
Well, I don't believe it. Any more than you believe in that so-called curse the last time I talked to you.
I know. I was wrong. Heaven forgive me for letting the boy go.
Look, Mr. Turnbull, things just don't make sense at all.
Come back, Mr. Dollar, and we'll talk about it here.
Listen to me.
Yes?
Before I decide what I'm going to do, I want to know why you hired a thug to try to put me out of the picture.
What? I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, you don't? Well, he made it plenty plain that he's handled strong-arm jobs for you before.
That's impossible.
Gave me your name as the man who's hired him many times. Frederick Whoa, hold it a minute.
Dollar, I'm very sorry, but I haven't the least...
Maybe I will go back to New York at that.
Mr. Dollar.
It suddenly dawned on me that I must have been slightly befuddled by the partial beating I'd taken earlier. You know, when the thug made his little confession a few minutes before.
I'll talk. It was Turnbull hired me. Frederick Turnbull.
Frederick Turnbull, he'd said, instead of Eric Turnbull. Sure, they sound alike. But a guy who's done a lot of strong-arm jobs, knows the right name of the guy that hired him, that can mean only one thing. Someone had instructed that thug to say he'd been hired by Turnbull. But who? I canceled out the rest of my flight to Cairo, made reservations back to New York, and then while waiting for that plane, ran up item 13, $82 American. On phone calls to whomever I could dig up among the Egyptian government authorities who'd been overseeing the excavation of Kamashek's tomb. What little I learned was pretty much summed up by the British doctor who'd been a member of the expedition.
Very mysterious, Mr. Dollar. You see, because of the superstition about violating the tomb, only 2 of our people even touched any of the bones we found within it.
Yeah?
And incidentally, that is all we found. The tomb had been thoroughly ransacked by thieves, probably centuries ago.
Yeah, but you were saying, Doctor.
Oh, yes. Only 2 touched any of the remains. One was a native carrier, as soon as the bones had been properly sprayed with a preservative.
Uh-huh.
And the other was Donald Cronin, who, for some reason or other, wrapped up the bones and sent them by air to his uncle, Mr. Eric Turnbull in the United States.
Oh? Well, go on.
Well, that's really all, Mr. Dollar. Except, of course, that both of them have died of some strange malady that the authorities have not been able to determine. And that's why the tomb has been officially closed again.
Hey, listen, tell me something. Could the bones have been accessible to anyone before those 2 touched them?
Yes, to anyone in the party. Well, now, don't tell me that you suspect...
Oh, listen, mister, I don't know what I suspect. But I don't believe it was any curse of a long-dead pharaoh that killed those 2 men.
Even in view of what happened to those who entered the tomb of Tutankhamun for some years ago, and then the tomb of King...
Look, tell me this, will you? Have any of the expedition returned to America?
Well, of course, the authorities have here no reason for holding them.
You haven't answered my question.
No. Well, only the 2 young men that Donald brought along with him.
Who were they?
Carl Fortina.
Well, who's he?
From New York. Like Donald himself, he's an archaeologist.
And the other?
One of his colleagues at the museum in, I believe it's in Stamford.
What's his name?
He's a young osteological expert, son of a curator at the museum, as I recall.
What?
His name is Walter Harkness.
Well, I'll be.
But surely you don't think...
Doctor, you go right ahead and hang those 2 deaths on good old King Kamashek. Me? I'm going after a couple of live suspects. There was plenty of time before the New York plane for a quick look for my heavy-handed pal in the alley where I'd left him. But he'd either crawled away or been picked up by the gendarmes, and I didn't have time for a session with them. Item 14, $150 for some food. Then aboard the plane, and we took off. It was a rough case to figure. Actually, of course, the insurance angle was done and over with. It ended with Donald Cronin's death. And 2 people would benefit by his death, both of them number 1 suspects. One, his uncle, Eric Turnbull, who would now take over the $1 million estate. The other, Dorothy Harkness, who would gain a big chunk of life insurance money, along with the museum, of course, that her father... hold everything. Her father, Adam Harkness, who opposed her marriage to Donald, who looked on him simply as a source of income for the museum, who... Hold everything is right. There was the son, too, Walter Harkness, who ducked back to the States the minute Donald died. How did he fit into this? Believe me, in spite of all the talk in it, the belief in it, the one thing I was sure had nothing to do with the whole matter was the curse of Kamashek. Nevertheless, call it hunch or whatever you like, the more I thought about it, the more certain I became that I'd find all the answers in a package that Donald had mailed back to the States. A package containing the bones of Pharaoh Kamashek.
Mr. Dollar.
Hello, Haskins. Mr. Turnbull in?
Yes, and I'm sure he wishes to see you. It's a frightful thing about Master Donald, isn't it, sir?
How does Mr. Turnbull feel about it?
Terribly broken up, sir.
I'll bet.
Oh, but please come in. He's in the library.
Thanks.
He just received a package the poor boy sent to him before he...
Wait, Haskins. Has he opened it yet?
He was examining the contents when the doorbell... Good heavens.
Mr. Turnbull.
He's fallen from his chair, Mr. Dollar. Mr. Dollar, he's... Oh, no.
Yeah, Haskins. He's dead.
Now here's our star to tell you about the final episode of this week's story.
Before I do, please let me thank you for the letters you keep sending us about the program. So many come in every day that it's become quite a chore to answer them, but you know something? I love it. As a matter of fact, your letters are appreciated by all of us who are involved in the production and presentation of the show. Our director, the writers, the various members of our cast, and our excellent technical crew. So please don't stop. Tomorrow, the wind-up. And a sorry example of what the lust for money can sometimes do to nice people. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. It is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone, who also wrote this week's story. Be sure to join us tomorrow night, same time and station, for the next exciting episode of Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar. Roy Rowan speaking. From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
Dr. St. Clair returning your call, Stinky.
Oh, hi, Leonard.
Where have you been, Johnny? It's been years.
Yeah, I know. Listen, can you give me a hand?
Who got poison this time?
2 of them. I hope it's poison, and that you can prove it for me.
We'll try. What do I do?
Meet me here at the home of Eric Turnbull in Stamford, Connecticut.
Okay, but Johnny...
Give you the address in a minute.
But Johnny, what do you mean you hope somebody got poisoned?
Because if they didn't, I'm going to go off my rocker.
What?
Because the only other possible cause of death could be a curse. The curse of Kamashek.
Who?
An Egyptian king who died a couple of dozen centuries ago.
What?
tonight. And every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Inter-Allied Life Insurance Company, Crutchfield Square, Hartford, Connecticut. Assignment, The Curse of Kamashek Matter. Expense account continued. I called Dr. Leonard St. Clair, an old school chum, because I knew him to be one of the foremost toxicologists in the country. And I was telling the truth. I hoped it could be shown that some kind of poison killed Donald Cronin and subsequently his uncle Eric Turnbull. Both apparently had believed in the curse of the old Egyptian pharaoh, a curse that was to befall anyone who violated his ancient tomb on the banks of the Nile. Donald had done this in excavating the tomb, but his uncle here in Stamford had only touched the bones that Donald had airmailed to him.
He was opening the package that Master Donald, God rest his soul, that Master Donald had sent him just before he died, there at the tomb in Egypt. I brought them in here to the library for him, sir.
Go on, Haskins.
Well, then you rang the doorbell. I left him with it, and when you and I came in here...
Yeah, dead.
From the curse of Kamashek, Mr. Dollar.
Oh, Haskins, I don't believe it. A friend of mine, Dr. St. Clair, will be here shortly, and he'll be able to...
Shouldn't we notify the police?
No, later.
But leave my poor employee's body just lying there?
For the time being, yes. Until Dr. St. Clair examines it.
As you wish, sir.
That's what I wish. Haskins. One person in this confusing mess I hadn't given a second thought to. As it turned out, there wasn't time, for Len St. Clair arrived a few minutes later in a car equipped like a miniature laboratory. No doubt as a result of the police work he was frequently called on to do. First, of course, in his capacity as an MD, he made a thorough examination of Eric Turnbull's body for purposes of death certificate data.
Poison, all right, Johnny. I'm sure of it. At least as sure as I can be, short of making an autopsy.
But what kind of poison, Len? And how administered?
Well, at the risk of making it sound like a dime novel, I'd say it was an extremely rare,
Well, what? Come on.
Well, it's something I haven't heard of in years. Related to the old Indian arrow poison. It's very difficult to detect.
Can you make sure?
Yes, if you'll help me drag some of my equipment in from the car, including a cage of white mice.
What?
Yeah, on which to experiment with samples of the stuff.
Samples from those old bones out of the tomb?
That's right. Now, from what you've told me, only 2 people have touched the bones since the minute they were discovered in the tomb.
3. A native carrier, Donald Cronin, and now the late Eric Turnbull.
And they've all died. But, Johnny.
Yeah?
The poison I'm thinking of would hardly have been put on those bones in the time of the pharaohs. Oh, and by the way, I hope no one's touched them here.
No, I've left them just as they are in that mailing wrapper.
Good. Because it could be fatal. I'll carefully scrape them when we get the equipment in here.
We brought in what Len needed for his work, including the white mice. Then I closed him in the library and left him to his experiments. To a bit of research, too, for he'd brought in a couple of thick books on toxicology. As a matter of routine, I phoned the local coroner and then tried to reach Dorothy Harkness. Her number didn't answer. I was about to drive over to her little apartment when Len came out of the library.
I was right, Johnny. Curaba arsenium.
That the name of the stuff?
Uh-huh. In its powder form, absorbed into the pores of the skin, it could be fatal almost immediately. And listen to me.
Yeah?
Somehow, between the time the bones of that old king were discovered and the time that Donald Cronin touched them, somebody put that poison on him.
How? Without endangering himself?
By keeping it in aqueous solution until the bones were sprayed with it.
Sprayed with it? Wait a minute.
Yeah?
Sprayed with it, huh? A doctor, an Englishman who was on the expedition, told me that the bones had been sprayed with some kind of preservative, even before the native carrier touched them.
You thinking what I'm thinking?
Yeah, right. Instead of preservative, it was the poison.
Well, who sprayed them?
I've got a wild idea, Len. But if it's right, it'll sew up this whole case. I wonder who that is.
Well, while you're finding out, I'm going back and recheck these tests. But only as a matter of routine, because I'm sure I'm right.
I beg your pardon, sir.
Yeah, Haskins?
Miss Dorothy Harkness is here, sir.
Huh?
And her young brother, Walter. Shall I ask them in, sir?
By all means.
What a terrible thing that has happened.
Is that really the way you feel about it, Dorothy?
Yes, just what do you mean by that, Mr. Dollar? I'm Walter Harkness.
Well, come right in, Walter. Because I have a sneaking suspicion you're the boy I've been looking for.
What?
Your conscience finally began to hurt you? Would you like to sit down and write your confession now?
What are you talking about?
Or did you and Dorothy just come here to put on a front? You know, as a cover-up?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Johnny, what are you saying?
Sit down, both of you, because I'm going to be saying plenty.
Look here, Mr. Dollar.
Sit down, I said. Now sit down. All right, Dorothy, we'll begin with you.
Johnny, I don't understand.
Now listen to
what
me. From what you told me, and I've no other reason for believing it except that you told me, Donald Cronin was in love with you.
It was true. And
At any rate, he made you part beneficiary of his $100,000 life insurance policy. Half of it, I believe. A cool $50,000.
How can you say or even
Oh,
think...
be quiet.
Mr. Dollar...
I'm coming to you right now, Walter. You're working for the museum where your father is curator of archaeology. The museum that has depended quite a lot not only on Donald Cronin's scientific contributions, but his monetary help as well.
That may be true, but now look
The
here.
museum, the other beneficiary of Donald's insurance, also $50,000.
Mr. Dollar, if you're implying that I had anything to do with Donald's death
You
in
can
order
shut
to gain...
up, too, and let me talk. This is the first chance I've had to begin to tie this case up. The first time any of the crazy elements in it made sense. No, wait, tell me this. Eric Turnbull was opposed to Donald's interest in the museum, wasn't he?
Well, yes.
Sure. And I'll bet my bottom dollar that if something happened to both Donald and his uncle, the estate worth nearly $1 million was willed by Donald to the museum.
That's true, Johnny, but there's
No wonder Eric Turnbull was afraid for Donald's life. Because he knew who would ultimately benefit most by his death. No wonder he hated you, Dorothy.
Johnny! Oh, Johnny, you can't mean you think that I would...
No, no. I think you were only being used as a tool, Dorothy. You told me yourself how your father opposed your marrying him. How his only interest was in getting money for the museum. Is that true, Walter?
Yes, Mr. Dollar, that is true. But if you mean to imply that I or any of us was involved in Donald's death...
Walter, the more I think about it, the more I'm sure you are directly involved. Now sit down.
It's a lie. I swear to it, Mr. Dollar. You're wrong. It's a lie.
We'll see about that. Because there's one thing you may have overlooked. I know what killed Donald Cronin.
You do?
Oh, yes, Walter. Just as well as you do.
But I don't. I haven't the least...
The curse of Kamashek?
The curse
Johnny?
of Kamashek. Not by a long shot. Was it, Walter?
I told you I haven't the
All right,
slightest...
then tell me this. Immediately the pile of bones was found at Kamashek's tomb before anyone touched them.
I refuse to touch them,
Will you listen to me? Before anybody touched them, somebody sprayed those bones with a so-called preservative. And I mean so-called.
I don't know why you should.
Oh?
Well, that's common practice these days, in case you don't know it, but I fail to see
what was supposed to be a preservative was in reality a deadly poison.
What?
Oh, come on now, Walter.
But you're wrong. You must be wrong. That's impossible.
You know, you're very convincing, I must admit.
Well, it's true. I applied that preservative, Mr. Dollar.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Aqueous solution, wasn't it?
Of course.
And I'll bet you washed your hands very carefully immediately afterward, didn't you?
Yes, of course I did, because I was told to.
By whom?
By... Oh, no.
Walter? What is it?
Holy... Tell me, Walter. Walter!
Yes?
Do you know anything about a man who tried to intercept me on my way to Egypt? To make sure I didn't get there until the bones of the pharaoh were sent to Eric Turnbull and that Donald Cronin died?
No, I don't, believe me.
Then answer me this one. Did you make up the, we'll call it preservative, that you used over there?
No.
Then who did? And who told you to be sure to wash your hands immediately after using it? Well?
Walter! Oh, no!
I'm afraid so, Dorothy.
Oh, no!
Better tell me, Walter.
Beg your pardon, Mr. Dollar, but Mr. Harkness Sr. is here, too.
Mr. Dollar, I'm Adam Harkness, curator of archaeology at the museum.
Well, Mr. Harkness, I'm really glad to see you.
Dorothy, Walter. Mr. Dollar, I've come to pick up the bones from the grave of Kamashek that I understand Donald Cronin sent to his uncle instead of to me through some misunderstanding.
Oh, yeah, sure. I had a notion you'd want to pick up those bones, Dr. Harkness. And I'll give them to you on one condition.
Oh? What is that?
that you take them out of the package in which they arrived here with your bare hands. That you carry them out of this house also in your bare hands.
Why, that's a strange...
Will you?
Of course not.
Why?
Why, because such priceless relics are too fragile,
Too full of a deadly poison that you had them sprayed with? Curaba arsenium, I believe it's called.
I don't know what you're... Walter, what have you been telling us?
It's true, isn't it, Father?
Well, Dr. Harkness...
Daddy!
I don't know how you found out, Dollar, but I'll tell you this. You won't ever live...
Wait a minute, put that thing down.
Father!
Wait a minute!
Daddy!
Johnny?
You stopped him all right, Len. But I think he'll live.
Good. I knew all the police work I've been doing would come in handy sometime.
Thanks for barging in at the psychological moment.
I was only coming in to confirm the results of my tests. But I guess Dr. Harkness had already done it.
Yeah. So, I guess the museum will profit mightily from half the insurance and all of the estate of Donald Cronin. The museum, that is, without Dr. Adam Harkness. Expense account total, including transportation back to Hartford, $985. Remarks? Well, doesn't mean a thing, I know, but I kind of wonder what I might have found if I'd been assigned to investigate the deaths of the people who excavated some of those other old Egyptian tombs. Tombs that had a curse on them. Interesting thought, isn't it? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Now, here's our star to tell you about next week's story.
Next week, a search for $80,000 that was never there, and a body that was never there. Yet both of them had to be found. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. It is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone, who also wrote this week's story. Heard in this week's cast were Paul Dubov, Alan Reed Sr., Dick Crenna, Virginia Gregg, Ben Wright, Forrest Lewis, Eric Snowden, Barney Phillips, James McCallion, and Les Tremaine. Musical supervision by Amerigo Marino. Be sure to join us on Monday night, same time and station, for another exciting story of yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Roy Rowan speaking.
From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
Mort Parkinson, Johnny, Eternity Mutual.
Oh, how are you, Mort?
I couldn't feel much worse.
It's the olives that do it, not the martinis.
I wish it were that simple. Can you come over to my office right away, Johnny?
Well, I guess so, if...
I don't often pull that confidential business, but I really would hesitate to go into this one on the phone.
Pretty rough, huh?
I'm afraid you're going to find it even worse than that. It's about Ed Morgan, Johnny.
Ed Morgan.
I'm sorry. I know he was a good friend of yours.
He's one of the best I ever had. Ed was a great guy. It's too bad he had to die that way.
Johnny, it's too bad he didn't die a year sooner.
What?
You'd better come on over to the office.
Tonight And every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to the Home Office, Eternity Mutual Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the confidential matter. Item 1, $2.85. Taxi from my apartment to the Eternity Building in the 7th floor office of Mort Parkinson, Vice President and General Manager. It was a room I well remembered, with its blank walnut paneling and deep leather chairs. I'd worked on a lot of cases with Mort, and with the late Ed Morgan, too. And it sounded now as though Ed, my good friend from a long time back, was about to become a case himself.
Come in, Johnny. Pull up a chair.
Thanks, Mort. Well, that was quite a phone call.
It's quite a situation.
Yeah, I gathered that.
No, I just can't talk sitting down. Old habit, I guess. Remember when we used to be over in the old Johnstone building before we built this new one? We had those old-fashioned stand-up desks. It was when old man Clement was still alive.
And before I was.
Oh, yes. I keep forgetting about you newcomers.
Meaning everybody who's come into the game within the last 40 years.
I suppose I am one of the original settlers. And set in my ways, too.
Yeah, well, what about
I sure hated to see those desks go. You could stand in front of them, lean an elbow on them, make out a report or a speech.
Mort, you're trying too hard to avoid it.
Avoid what?
You didn't call me over here just to reminisce about the old days.
In a way, maybe I did.
You know, it's funny. I always thought you liked Ed Morgan.
But I did.
Then why did you say it's too bad he didn't die a year sooner?
Because I liked him. Except like is too weak a word, actually. I thought as much of Ed as I would have of my own son if I'd had one. Why, I'm the one who hired him in the first place. Remember, Johnny?
Yeah, I remember.
And I took a personal interest in his career. Watched him work his way up. Till finally he was appointed chief adjuster for the West Coast, head of our San Francisco claims office. That was darn good for a man as young as he was. And I was proud of him, Johnny.
Yeah, I know you were.
He was a hard worker, honest, dependable. And he had a good, sound future ahead of him. And then, just like that.
Accidents are usually just like that.
A foggy night, sharp curve, and he drove his car off a cliff into the Pacific Ocean. And that was that. Tragedy. Fini, the end.
Only it apparently wasn't the end, or you wouldn't have called me over here.
No, it wasn't, Johnny. I wish it had been.
Meaning?
You'd better brace yourself. Within 2 weeks after Ed Morgan's death, we started getting complaints from some of our clients.
What do you mean, complaints?
Oh, demands for adjustment on claims Ed had reported paid weeks before, requests for past due settlements, and so on.
Mort, I don't get it.
Neither did I. So I sent a company accountant out to San Francisco on the QT and put him to work on the claims files. And we found out, Johnny.
You found out what?
That Ed's accounts had been doctored for some time.
What?
Johnny, in the months before he was killed, he'd embezzled nearly $80,000.
Ed Morgan?
Ed Morgan.
I don't believe it.
He did it. You might as well accept the fact.
Anybody else, yes, anybody else. But not Ed. For one thing, money didn't mean that much to him.
I know. We were always joshing him about living like an old hermit instead of a young bachelor.
Well, then why would he do it, steal $80,000 after all these years of being honest? What would he want that would cost that much money?
That's exactly what I wish you'd find out.
Now, wait a second, Mort, wait a second. This is one I don't want any part of.
Neither do I. But I'm afraid I'm stuck with it. And you are too, in a way.
Why?
Because Ed was your friend. Here's a flight ticket and reservation to San Francisco. Plane leaves in 2 hours.
No. I'd rather pass it, Mort.
Well, so would I. But we can't. Neither of us. There are too many questions left. And they've got to be answered.
Not by me.
$80,000 of the company's money is missing. I can't just write it off and forget it. It has to be accounted for.
There are other investigators, Mort.
And another thing that's just as important, to me at least, is to find out why he did it. It's a failure in human dynamics. A man like Ed, a man everybody respected and trusted, and he goes wrong. Why?
Get somebody else to find out.
I'd be pretty grateful if you'd do it, Johnny.
Mort, I just don't want any part of it.
I know how you feel.
It's quite a shock to find out he was a crook. It's like somebody pulling the rug out from under you. So now you want to forget all about him. Leave him safely dead and buried.
Dead, Mort, but not buried. If you remember, they recovered the car, but not his body. It's still somewhere beneath the Pacific.
All right, then. Look at it from an efficiency standpoint, if nothing else. To any other investigator, Ed Morgan would be just a name, an unknown quantity. But you knew him.
I thought I did.
Regardless of what he did, Johnny, I just hate to think of a stranger pawing into his past. Maybe I still think back to the old times in the old country when the family buried their own dead.
I know.
And sometimes, Johnny, a friend has to go all the way. Even when the other person is, goofed. Isn't that what the younger generation calls it?
I'm not the younger generation, Mort. Right now, I'm older than Confucius.
I'd sure appreciate it, Johnny. And after all, somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, somebody's got to do it. And like you said, Ed was my friend. All right, Mort. Let's have the ticket. Item 2, $14.35. Tips, taxi, and incidentals in Hartford and same in San Francisco. Plane trip between points paid from expense account of company manager and not included herewith. I went straight from the airport to Ed's last address when he was still alive, an apartment house in the Nob Hill section called the Drakeley Arms. And there's where I got my first surprise. Ed had always been the two-room bachelor walk-up type. But the Drakeley Arms consisted of equal parts of glitter, glass, swank, and price, including a uniformed doorman, a small private bar off the lobby, and an assistant manager with a gardenia on his lapel. Oh, he was a rare one, that manager. And it was a real gardenia.
I am, of course, most desirous of assisting you in every way possible, Mr. What did you say your name was?
Dollar. D-O-L-L.
I can spell dollar.
I'll bet you can.
I beg your pardon.
Oh, it's quite all right.
I didn't mean...
You didn't mean to be offensive, I understand. Now, about the former occupant of Suite 14.
Mr. Dollar, I'm terribly afraid...
Oh, please don't be.
I mean, there is simply very little I can tell you about the late Mr. Morgan.
A matter of discretion? Is that it?
Discretion?
A policy of the house? Something of that sort?
Well, we do, of course, try to protect the privacy of our residents. I'm sure you understand.
Even to the extent of turning down $20?
Well...
A curse one, isn't it?
Under the circumstances...
Nice likeness of Andrew Jackson, isn't it?
Thank you, sir. Gratuities of this nature are always so helpful in smoothing the rough pathway of human relations. Don't you think so, Mr. Dollar?
Definitely. It's already helping you remember my name.
Well, money is a mental stimulant, isn't it?
Don't call it money. Just think of it as item 3.
I beg your pardon. Item...
Oh, that's quite all right.
I meant...
Yeah, I know. It's kind of a habit I seem to be picking up. Now, has your memory been stimulated any in regard to Ed Morgan?
Oh, yes, the late Mr. Morgan. Pardon me, Mr. Dollar. Yes? Oh, yes, Countess Margie. Yes, I'll be delighted to send the boy up for 2 quarts of suds.
Suds?
Would a nice dry Bavarian ale be... Yes, Countess, just plain beer. Yes, Countess, right away. Frightful old lady. Mixes it with creme de menthe, you know. Now, where were we, Mr. Dollar?
We weren't, not yet.
Oh, yes, the late Mr. Morgan. Well, he'd been our guest, you understand, for about 6 months at the time of his tragic accident.
What was he paying for his suite of rooms?
Oh, well, ordinarily we don't release information of that.
Forget it. This is not ordinary. How much?
$1,200 a month.
I see.
Oh, he was a true gentleman, if I may say so. A bon vivant. And on the crassly materialistic side, if you'll forgive me, sir, a very free spender.
Sorry, 20's the limit.
Mr. Dollar, I was not trying to coerce your generosity by, well...
Putting on another bite?
Precisely.
All right. So Ed was bedded down in a mink-lined stall and was throwing money around like water. What else? Who came to see him? What sort of visitors did he have?
Well, none at all that I can recall.
None at all? He leased that overpriced cubicle and then just sat in it?
Well...
What about friends here in the building?
Well, most of our guests might be termed individually exclusive. Even eccentric in some cases. Except, of course, Mrs. Barrett.
Mrs. Barrett?
Yes. One of the loveliest guests we've ever had the pleasure of... Excuse me, Mr. Dollar. Yes. Yes, Countess Margie. The boy is on his way. I know, but he has to go clear down to the corner. Yeah. Well, Please tell little Pim Pam that I'm so sorry. A dog drinks that stuff, too. Now, where were we?
About this Mrs. Barrett you mentioned.
Oh, yes. Well, of course, she and Mr. Morgan were inseparable, you understand. They were together constantly.
And Mr. Barrett?
Oh, there wasn't any. Well, not recently, I mean. Deceased. You know, dead.
Yeah, when?
Early this year, as I recall. I didn't know him, of course. Mrs. Barrett moved in here shortly after his death. Not until then.
And Ed Morgan, when did he move in?
About 6 weeks later.
Oh, he met her here then?
Oh, no, they were already acquainted. Well acquainted.
I see.
In fact, I believe that Mr. Morgan and the young and very lovely widow met at the time of her husband's death. A matter of settling the estate or something of that sort.
It would figure all right.
I don't remember exactly why I thought so, but I do recall having an impression at the time that he moved in here only because of her. And as I say, they were together constantly right from the first.
That's all very interesting. I wonder if I could have a talk with this Mrs. Barrett.
That would be utterly impossible, I'm afraid.
Now, look, if you think you can
I simply mean she isn't here.
Isn't here?
She's been gone for 10 days now.
Where'd she go?
I really haven't the slightest idea, Mr. Dollar.
Well, if she moved out, she must have left a forwarding address of some kind.
Oh, she didn't move out. She still has her apartment here. She'll be back eventually, I imagine.
But at the moment,
I haven't heard a word from her since she left. Oh, poor dear. You know, one can understand why she'd want to get away for a while. Such a tragic coincidence, having 2 deaths of exactly the same... Oh, confound that woman.
Wait a minute. What do you mean by tragic coincidence?
Oh, well, as I understand it, Mrs. Barrett's husband also died in some sort of accident. Yes, Countess.
Now, here is our star to tell you about tomorrow's episode of this week's story.
Tomorrow, the trail back into a man's past is a faint and twisting one. And at times it runs through quicksand. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. Written by Les Crutchfield, it is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone. Be sure to join us tomorrow night, same time and station, for the next exciting episode of Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Hugh Brundage speaking. From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
Mac Woodson, Mr. Dollar. The girl from the claims office called and gave me this number.
Oh, yes, Mr. Woodson. It seems we're working on the same case for the same company.
Well, I've been working on Mr. Ed Morgan's files and records here for the past week now. I've turned up some...
How much is missing?
Well, about $80,000 so far. All of it was taken during the 4 months immediately preceding his death. I'll say one thing. In 20 years as an accountant, I've never seen a looting more cleverly carried out.
Oh, Ed was a very bright lad. A man who'd go far, they all said.
Did you know him, Mr. Dollar?
I thought I did. He was one of my best friends. But it turns out I'm only beginning to know him. Could you meet me in his office around 10 o'clock, Mr. Woodson?
Yes, that's where I am now. I've been working on these books day and night.
Better be careful. That's what got Ed into trouble.
How's that?
Tonight and every weekday night, Bob Bailey and the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to the Home Office, Eternity Mutual Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut. Assignment, The Confidential Matter. Location, San Francisco. Expense account continued. Item 4, $1, 1 martini. Item 5, $1, 1 tip to the bartender who stirred the martini. All in the house that Jack built. I don't know who built it, actually, but it took Jack to live in it. $1,200 a month, to be exact. That was the take-home bite for an apartment at the Drakeley Arms on Nob Hill. And, of course, that didn't include drinks in the intimate little private bar just off the lobby. And this is where Ed Morgan had lived during the last 5 months of his life, until he missed a curve one night and drove his car off a cliff into the Pacific. Ed Morgan, whose idea of a big night had always been his pipe, slippers, and a mystery novel. But things were different when I'd known him and been his friend. For one thing, he hadn't stolen $80,000. Or I don't think he had.
Do you find the martini adequate to your expectations, sir?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, indeed. It's a heck of a belt for a buck.
Thank you, sir.
Quite a nice little place you got here.
Oh, I find it a most agreeable sanctuary from the stress and strife and the hurly-burly of the city.
Been here long?
I have tended bar here in the Drakeley Arms Rendezvous for some 2 years now.
Oh, well, then you may have known a friend of mine who had an apartment here up until a month ago. A Mr. Edward Morgan?
Oh, yes. Mr. Morgan was a regular customer here. An eager supplicant for my humble and healing wares.
A beer drinker mostly, as I recall.
The Rendezvous does not serve beers, sir.
Oh, forgive me. I didn't know.
Quite all right, sir. Yes, I was here before Mr. Morgan moved in, and here I am still, now that he is no longer with us. Such is the chance and mystery of life.
One just never knows.
Precisely. Oh, could I serve you?
Not yet, thanks. Get to know Ed pretty well, did you?
The policy of the Drakeley Arms, sir, is to maintain a certain degree of formality in relations between guests and personnel.
Sort of like a zoo, you might say, with bars to separate the people from the animals.
The comparison is quite apt.
Somehow I can't see Ed Morgan sacking in a marble squirrel cage like this joint.
I confess, he hardly seemed the type to me, sir. He was much too unrestrained for the Drakeley.
He came in here a lot, did he?
Almost nightly. For a few minutes at least, on his way to some gala night spot.
Gala night spot, Ed Morgan?
Oh, yes.
In all the years I knew Ed, I was only able to drag him into a gala night spot once. He stayed 20 minutes, then left because his tie was choking.
Are you quite certain that your friend was this same Ed Morgan?
I wish I weren't. Who were his friends? Did he always come in alone?
Oh, no, never alone, sir. He and Nicky were inseparable.
Nicky?
Oh, I should say, of course, Mrs. Barrett.
Oh, a young widow, as I remember. Lives here in the building.
A lovely girl. Fascinating.
And also unrestrained?
Definitely.
And Ed, then, was one of her friends.
Oh, they were together every night, sir. An hour here in our little establishment, a few champagne cocktails, then out to dinner, dancing, the opera, ballet.
Ed Morgan?
Oh, quite. Life was just a mad whirl for those two. I gather your friend was something of a wealthy playboy.
He was a claims adjuster for an insurance company.
Then, how could he possibly live in the fashion he did?
If I told you, you'd flip.
I beg your pardon?
Tell me something. Was Ed in here on the night he was killed?
Oh, yes. He left here about 9, as I recall. And a few hours later, he was dead.
How did this Nicky take it? Pretty broken up, was she?
She is a woman of very strong character.
Ah, in other words, she didn't bat an eye.
Well, I wouldn't...
That night Ed was killed. Did he leave here alone?
No, sir.
He was alone when he went off the cliff.
Not when he left here, though. Nicky was with him.
Item 6, $2.40, taxi to the Telegraph Hill apartment of Lisa Duval. Lisa had been Ed Morgan's secretary for about 4 years. But it seemed Miss Mousy Business at the office was Miss North Beach Bohemia at home. Italian slacks and halter. Cushions on the floor. And, naturally, a view of the Bay Bridge from a corner window. We sat on the floor, naturally, and drank Chianti from a half-gallon jug, while a record player moaned agonizedly under the gouging of its needle. Bartok, I gathered, was now last year's kick. This was progressive jazz.
Maybe this seems a little affected to you, Mr. Dollar. The way I dress and live in private life, as you might say.
Why so? Everybody's got a right to salt his own dish of porridge the way he likes it.
Well, I've done this deliberately, I guess, as a sort of antidote for the insurance business.
Has it been that bad?
Not bad. Boring. Oh, not your end of it, of course. Investigation work must be exciting.
Yes, scream a minute, day and night.
But just keeping records, filing papers week after week. I used to stare out of the office window at the ships in the harbor and think about stowing away on one. But of course, I didn't have the nerve.
Too bad. The cruise would have been delirious.
I thought of quitting several times. I guess I stayed because of Ed, Mr. Morgan.
Oh?
He was always so wonderful to work for. So lenient and understanding. Up until the last few months, at least.
What about those last few months, Lisa? What came over him?
I don't know. He was different, that's all. As though he were tense and nervous, under pressure.
Any idea where the pressures came from?
He didn't confide in me, Mr. Dollar.
What were your personal relations between the two of you during the years you worked for him?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, were you friendly, formal, strictly business?
Friendly, I think, would cover it best.
Did you see each other outside of office hours?
Occasionally.
I noticed one of his pipes there in the bookcase.
He'd come here sometimes in the evening, and we'd listen to music and talk. Up until the
last few months?
It wasn't that we stopped being friends, Mr. Dollar. He was just different, that's all.
Tense, under pressure.
That's about the only way I can describe it.
But you don't know why he was that way.
Well, looking back, I suppose it was because of the money. If he really did take it. I just can't believe it. Ed wasn't that kind of a man. He was gentle and honest. At least until...
Until the last few months.
Yes.
Or were you going to say, until she came along?
How did you...
Lisa.
Yes.
How long have you been in love with Ed?
Ever since I started to work for him. But he never knew it. He couldn't even see me.
I'm sorry, Lisa.
I'm sorry for you too, Mr. Dollar. I know how close you and Ed were. And I know how you must feel being called in and having...
Forget it. It's a job, that's all.
Sure, just a job. So is major surgery.
This woman he was going around with, Nikki Barrett. Did you ever meet her?
I met her.
Well, what did you think?
What's the difference? I was prejudiced.
I'll allow for that.
In the old days, they used to believe in witches, vampires. Some of them were very beautiful, and they'd lure a man on, and then destroy him.
And you think she did something like that to Ed?
Oh, you weren't out this way during the time he knew her. You weren't around him to see how he changed.
No. Oddly enough, the one time I was through here about 3 months ago, Ed was unexpectedly called away on business.
He wasn't called away. He was avoiding you. He knew he was getting in too deep.
How'd he meet her?
She came to the office with a life insurance claim. $50,000. Her husband had just died. I knew her type from the minute she walked in. The grieving widow, all in black, and looking like a Powers model. And he just melted down and laid his head under her foot. That was the start of it.
Why'd she come to him? Unless she had a disputed claim.
There was a double indemnity clause. Her husband had been killed in an accident.
Her husband, too, huh?
What do you mean?
Ed Morgan died in an accident. Remember? Item 7, $1.15, taxi from Lisa's apartment to the Deckman building on Montgomery Street. It was after 10 and the financial district was nearly deserted. The canyons between the tall buildings were hollow and empty. A cold wind was blowing off the bay. Or maybe it was blowing out of the past. An old past, dead and far away. The pattern was beginning to look familiar. Too familiar. Lord, The woman gave me the forbidden apple to eat. Ed, too, it seemed. The same old whine, the same old dodge. And yet there was something not quite right about that pattern.
The accountant runs into some funny ones, Mr. Dollar. This Morgan case here is one of them.
How do you mean, Mr. Woodson?
Well, the way he was going about it, for one thing. Running hog wild, as you might say. Of course, as I said on the phone, his general scheme was pretty clever. He certainly knew standard procedures.
Well, he'd been with the company a long time.
Well, now, these payoff checks on claims. Of course, they were sent out from Hartford in care of this office. So what Morgan did was open a disbursement account in the bank here, then sign and deposit the checks and draw out the money in cash chargeable to direct disbursement funds under his own name.
Mr. Woodson.
Now, of course, the canceled checks would return to Hartford, but since they were countersigned to disbursement, they wouldn't even be processed. Instead, they'd be returned to Morgan. So, you see, there'd be no evidence in Hartford.
Mr. Woodson, I'll accept the fact that Ed was clever. But what did you mean there was something funny in the way he was going about it?
Well, he must have known it couldn't last. It was a good scheme for a short time, but it carried the seeds of its own destruction.
In what way?
Complaints. Some of these claims are 4 months old, and legitimate claims. Morgan couldn't stall these people off forever.
Oh, I see.
Only other embezzlement case I've worked on that was similar was a man who worked a quick swindle for a blackmail payoff. He knew he'd probably get caught, but he just had to take the chance.
Yeah, you may have stumbled onto something, Mr. Woodson.
Oh, is it so? You mean it ties in with that file folder you've been studying there?
Oh, I don't know. It's an investigation report on an accidental death. Happened about a year ago. Ed Morgan handled the insurance claim and got to know the widow. He'd been running around with her for several months just before his death.
I don't quite see the... Oh, of course. Mr. Morgan also died in an accident.
Unless he was murdered.
Now, here is our star to tell you about tomorrow's episode of this week's story.
Tomorrow, $80,000 and a beautiful girl, both missing. Then one of the two is found and a bombshell explodes. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. Written by Les Crutchfield, it is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone. Be sure to join us tomorrow night, same time and station, for the next exciting episode of Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Hugh Brundage speaking. From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
This is Hector, Mr. Dollar.
Hector?
Hector Nerkley, at the Drakeley Arms Apartments. You were here night before last inquiring about the late Mr. Morgan.
Oh, yes, I remember. What can I do for you, Mr. Nerkley?
Oh, it's really quite the other way around.
All right, what can you do for me?
Well, I can give you some very interesting information, if you care to come over here.
Why can't you give it to me on the phone?
I'll tell you exactly why, Mr. Dollar, when you come over.
Oh, for the love of Pete.
Temper.
And why not? A month ago, the best friend I had in the world drove his car off a cliff into the Pacific. And his body's still out there in the ocean somewhere. It's never been recovered.
Mr. Dollar?
Then it turns out he was $80,000 short in his accounts. I can't find the money, nor the woman he was running around with before his death. I can't find out anything. And now if I want some... All right, I'll be there in 30 minutes.
Tonight and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. from Special Investigator Johnny Dollar, location San Francisco. To the Home Office, Eternity Mutual Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut. Assignment, the confidential matter. Expense account continued. Item 9, $1.70 taxi from my hotel to the Drakeley Arms Apartments. A snooty, high-priced joint where Ed Morgan had lived during the last 4 months of his life. Ed Morgan, a pipe and slippers bachelor who'd suddenly and strangely turned to champagne cocktails and high living. Who, as head of an insurance claims office, had found a way of swindling his employer out of $80,000 in 4 months. And who died a month ago as mysteriously as he'd lived. This was the man who at the moment was my assignment, whose past I was supposed to uncover. And he was also the man who'd been my lifelong friend.
Well, good evening, Mr. Dollar. My, you did make excellent time.
Now, look, if this turns out to be a runaround, so help me out.
Temper?
All right. You said you had some very important information that couldn't be discussed over the phone.
Well, it could have been discussed, of course. But, well, this information has to do with one of our guests, Mr. Dollar. A certain lovely young widow whom you seemed most concerned about the last time.
Nicky Barrett.
Quite.
Has she come back? Is she here?
I'm afraid not.
Then what is it?
First, I must ask you what your intentions are toward Mrs. Barrett.
Well, I'm not going to marry her.
Please, I hardly thought you were.
All right, then what's the point?
Simply this. I happen to be in a position to put you in touch with Mrs. Barrett.
You know where she's hiding out?
Hiding out?
All right, I'll drop the implication. You know where she is.
I do.
Well, then let's have it.
Why do you wish to find her?
Because she's the only lead I've got on the Morgan case. She and Ed were thicker than thieves during the 4 months before his death. And she was with him the night he was killed. Earlier in the evening, at least.
Are you going to have her arrested?
No. I just want to ask her some questions. I've got no case against her. Not yet, at least.
Mr. Dollar, can I depend upon you in one very important respect?
What's that?
Under no circumstances must you let Mrs. Barrett know that I told you where she is.
What's the matter? Afraid the board of directors would bust you to bellhop and strip off your gardenia?
That is not amusing. Nor too improbable, as a matter of fact. After all, the watchword of the Drakeley Arms is discretion.
Yeah, well, all right. It's a deal. I won't tell her.
Of course, there is one more little detail.
Oh, now what?
Well, the last time you requested information from me, Mr. Dollar, you were kind enough and generous enough. Well, really, this is a bit awkward.
What is it, Hector? Is the gardenia fund getting low?
Well, you did say, as I recall, that it was merely an item in an expense account.
All right. Here's another $20.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Now, what about Nicky Barrett?
Well, we just received a letter from Mrs. Barrett. She asks that her mail be forwarded to her in care of American Express, Panama City, Panama.
Item 10, $20 gratuity. Item 11, $388.45. Hotels, some telegrams, incidentals in San Francisco, and plane fare to Panama. I'd sent wires ahead before I left the States. It wasn't until after I cleared customs and was heading for the American Express office that I was certain the messages had produced any results.
Dispénsame, por favor.
Yeah?
You are Senor Johnny Dollar from the Estados, no?
That's right.
Capitan Garcia Ramullo of the Panama Federal Police, a sus órdenes, senor.
Oh, glad to know you, Captain.
I am honored, senor. We have received your telegram, and I have been instructed to cooperate with you very intensive.
Well, it may take just that. Now, about the woman I described in the telegram.
The Senora Barrett. Oh, Santa Madre, what a beautiful woman.
So I've heard.
You have not had the pleasure of acquainting her?
Not yet.
The best of your life is before you in that case.
Then I'll speed up and get to it. So you've already located her, huh?
Oh, but of course, senor. She has not changed her name, as you think, perhaps. So it was most simple.
Good. Glad it didn't cause you too much trouble.
Trouble? Senor, merely to gaze upon such a one is worth a lifetime of trouble.
Which is exactly what it cost a couple of guys I know.
Such eyes, such hair, such lips,
Yeah.
such...
Well, what do you say we...
Forgive me, senor. I am carried away with it.
Well, where is this living little doll staked out at the moment?
She is registered at the Hotel Primeso, room 17.
Hotel Primeso?
This is something most unusual, I think.
What do you mean?
The Primeso is one hotel very small, which is located on the waterfront. is most for sailors, fishermen.
I see.
The beautiful tourist, or one would think to find in a hotel of more elegance.
She may be deliberately staying away from the tourist belt.
Yes, sabe, senor. Who can tell the reasons of a woman?
Yeah. Is she living there alone?
So I have been informed. You expect someone with her?
I don't know what to expect. I don't even know why she came here. I'm moving in blind.
See, life is most difficult at times.
You didn't talk to her, did you? Let her know you were checking on her?
Please, senor.
I'm sorry, Captain. I had to be sure.
She is most entirely without suspicion.
Good. Well, I suppose I'd better check into a hotel first.
Then what are your plans, senor?
I don't know exactly. I'll talk to her, try to get some answers. And from there on, I'll just have to call it as I go.
I hope this lovely lady has not involved in some serious crime.
I hope not, too. But I wouldn't bet much on it. Item 12, $8, taxi, flat rate for the rest of the day. And by the time I checked into a hotel and showered and changed, the rest of the day didn't have long to go. The Hotel Promesa was on the waterfront, as Captain Garcia had said, and some distance from town. But although it wasn't a tourist trap, neither was it quite the sailor's flop house I'd been led to expect. It was built native style with bamboo shutters and wide verandas, half buried in a thicket of mango and banana. $5 bought me the desk clerk's undying affection, and 2 minutes later I stood unannounced at the door of room 17.
Just a minute. It's about time. I ordered that ice at least I thought you were the bellboy.
No. The name is Johnny Dollar.
Johnny Dollar.
Mind if I come in, Mrs. Barrett?
What for?
Well, it would be more comfortable than trying to talk out here in the veranda.
What is it you want to talk about?
A friend of mine. Name of Ed Morgan.
All right. Come on in. Sit down, Mr. Dollar.
Thanks.
I'd offer you a drink, but there's no ice. And in this kind of heat...
I don't care for a drink, thanks.
You'd think it would cool off after the sun goes down, but it doesn't. At least not very much. Sometimes a breeze comes up from... What are you staring at, Mr. Dollar?
You?
Why?
I'd had such glowing reports about you that I was sure they were exaggerated. They weren't.
Thanks. And did you come all the way down here just to check those glowing reports?
How do you know I came all the way down here?
What do you mean?
Maybe I live here.
No. I've heard of you before. Ed, Mr. Morgan used to talk about you.
Was it Ed or Mr. Morgan?
You don't miss much, do you?
I try not to.
It was Ed, as you undoubtedly knew.
Yes, I knew. But I wasn't sure why.
Why?
Why he lost his head. Now that I've seen you, I can understand. Who wouldn't?
Oh, please. I'd rather not talk about it, Mr. Dollar. Ever since that terrible accident, there's been only one thing I've wanted. To forget.
Well, I'm sorry to have to bring up unpleasant memories, Mrs. Barrett, but I've got to ask you some questions.
There's nothing...
The night of his death, what time did he leave you?
What do you mean?
You were together earlier in the evening. You left the bar at the Drakeley Arms together at 9 o'clock, but shortly after midnight, when Ed ran his car off a cliff into the Pacific, he was apparently alone.
We went to dinner, then he brought me back to the apartment house. He was going to Half Moon Bay to see a client. That's why he happened to be on that road. I don't want to talk about it, Mr. Dollar. It's horrible to think of him dying that way. His body's still out there in the ocean somewhere. That's why I came down here. To get away and try to forget.
Then you thought quite a lot of him, huh?
We were going to be married.
I see. Well, it's too bad it didn't work out with all the wealth Ed had and the beauty you have.
I had the idea that he just worked for an insurance company.
And lived the way he did? Oh, come now, Mrs. Barrett.
Well, actually, I didn't really consider it. My husband had left me quite well off.
How long were you married before he died?
Only 10 months.
Oh, you do have bad luck, don't you?
I don't think this attitude of yours...
Relax. Here, have a cigarette.
I don't smoke.
Oh? Do you mind if I do?
No, of course not.
Thanks. Do you have a suite here, Mrs. Barrett, or just this one room?
Just this room. Why?
Oh, and then this door must lead to the bath.
What do you think you're doing?
Empty, huh?
Of course it's empty.
Then the other possibility is that closet.
Stay away from there.
When I came in, there was cigarette smoke in the air, stubs in the ashtray.
There's no one here. Stay away from there.
Oh, look, Mrs. Barrett, turning out the lights may be romantic, but it's not the idea. What? I was still conscious but groggy, and I couldn't seem to get off the floor. I heard someone moving, heard the door to the veranda open and close. I shook my head, tried to clear it. I finally staggered to my feet and found the light switch. Nicky Barrett was cowering back against the wall, staring at me, scared but not saying anything. I stumbled toward the door. The veranda was empty. There was no sign of movement in the shadows. So there was somebody hiding in that closet.
No. There wasn't anybody here. I'm the one who hit you.
You'd have to have a fist 3 times your size.
It's true.
Forget it. I know the game now. I should have known it a lot sooner.
You're wrong.
There's only one person in this world who tears cigarettes apart and shreds the paper that way.
No.
The 2 of you, in on it together. They didn't find his body because there wasn't anybody to find. He's still alive. He was right here in this room. That was Ed Morgan.
Now, here is our star to tell you about tomorrow's episode of this week's story.
Tomorrow, a search for a dead man who intends to stay dead and who's willing to kill to do it. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. Written by Les Crutchfield, it is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone. Be sure to join us tomorrow night, same time and station, for the next exciting episode of Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Hugh Brundage speaking. From Hollywood, it's time now for
Johnny Dollar.
This is Capitan Garcia Ramullo of the Panama Federal Police.
Good. Your sergeant said he could locate you in a matter of minutes.
I am never lost from contact, senor. You have talked with the beautiful turista, no?
I have talked with her, yes, and I ended up getting socked in the jaw.
These Americano women are so very much athletics.
No, she didn't hit me. It was a guy who was hiding out in a closet.
I understand, senor.
Somehow I doubt it. Look, Garcia, it was the man I came down here to question her about. I'm sure of it.
But, senor, you have told me...
Yeah, I know. Apparently his death was faked. I think he's here, hiding out somewhere in Panama City. Do you think you can find him?
When my men make the search, senor, even a little dog could not escape.
Then go to it. His name is Ed Morgan, but he may be using another one. The charge is embezzlement.
You know his description, senor?
I ought to. He's been one of my best friends for years.
Tonight and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar, location Panama. To the Home Office, Eternity Mutual Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut. Assignment, the confidential matter. Expense account continued. Item 14, $12.85. Telegram to Hartford, advising them that the case had turned in a completely new direction. I'd taken the case with the idea of digging up a man's past, a man who had been one of my best friends, of finding out why, after a life of complete honesty and loyalty to his company, he had suddenly gone wrong and embezzled $80,000. I'd found out that part of the why was probably a lovely young widow named Nicky Barrett. But I'd found out more. The man we thought dead, who'd supposedly drowned when his car went off a cliff into the Pacific Ocean, was still alive. So now it was a matter of filing charges, requesting extradition for Panama, and, of course, capturing the fugitive. That I left to Captain Garcia for the moment and went to bed. When I came down to breakfast the next morning, I still hadn't heard back from Garcia. But I did get a return engagement from my little playmate of the night before.
Good morning, Johnny.
Oh, well. Good morning, Mrs. Barrett.
I came into town early especially to see you.
Why? A deep concern as to whether I survived that sock in the jaw?
No. No concern, really. I imagine you have a pretty tough jaw. Do you mind if I sit down?
If you promise not to double up your fist.
I can explain that, Johnny.
With all night to think about it? Yeah, I bet you can. How about some breakfast?
I don't really.
They got a special this morning, fried fish and papaya.
Oof.
Tastes even worse than it sounds.
No, I'll just have some coffee.
That we already have. Sugar, cream?
Just black. Thank you.
All right, you're on. Spin it out.
Well, I'll admit it was silly to claim I was the one who hit you last night.
Of course it was silly. I know who hit me.
You don't.
It was Ed Morgan. He was hiding in the closet in your hotel room.
You're wrong, Johnny. You don't mind if I call you Johnny, do you? I mean, you and Ed were such close friends. I feel I almost know you.
You could be wrong, Mrs. Barrett. I used to think I knew Ed until he met you and decided to tap the till for $80,000. All right, call me Johnny if it gives you more confidence in your act.
It's not an act.
Okay, if you didn't hit me and Ed didn't, then who was it?
Let's just say it was a friend.
He wasn't very friendly to me.
He misunderstood you coming there. He shouldn't have been there himself. He's married, and not that I knew it, though, until last night.
That's not a bad attempt, Mrs. Barrett, at a snow job, but I still don't buy it. Better drink your coffee.
Johnny, Ed was drowned in San Francisco when his car ran off into the ocean. He's dead.
How can he be dead in San Francisco and still be turning up cigarettes in Panama?
I did that.
You don't even smoke.
But the man who was there last night does. And I tore the cigarettes in that peculiar way. I picked up the habit from Ed. I just did it absent-mindedly, I guess.
Now, this gets better as it goes along.
Oh, I'm not lying. It's true.
No, I mean this fish and papaya. I guess you just have to get used to the mixture.
Oh, please, Johnny.
You're not even touching your coffee.
If I drink it, will you please listen to me?
I am listening to you. I just don't believe you.
Look, we all make mistakes. Last night you made a guess. You thought that was Ed, but you were wrong. So why be stubborn about it and cause a lot of unnecessary trouble? Let's forget it and be friends.
Can't afford it, sweetie. I haven't got that kind of money.
Do you think I sell my friendship?
It cost Ed $80,000 of the company's money.
No.
How much of that did you get? Half of it?
No.
More than half of it?
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
How much does he have left now?
Stop it! Stop saying such things.
All right.
Can't you understand once and for all? Ed isn't here. Nor anywhere else. He's dead.
No, he isn't. But I wish to heaven he were.
What do you mean?
Just that.
But he was your friend.
That's right. He was my friend. When I heard about his accident, heard he'd been killed, it hit hard. It hurt plenty. And I guess it hurt even more when I learned he'd been stealing from the company.
Johnny.
So I took the job of digging into the mess and trying to find some answers. I didn't want the job, didn't want any part of it, but I took it anyway. Somebody had to do it. And he had been my friend once. And then I find out he's still alive.
No,
See
Johnny.
what it means? Now I've got to catch him and take him back to stand trial. And that's going to be even tougher than facing his death and the fact he was a crook.
If Ed were alive, you'd take him back? Help send him to prison like any other common criminal?
That's what he is, isn't he?
But he was your friend.
Oh, skip it. You wouldn't understand.
I might, if you'd let me try.
The only thing you're trying to do, Mrs. Barrett, is to con me into thinking I might possibly be wrong. Thinking maybe it was somebody else in your room last night.
I told
you. The idea is to throw me off balance just long enough so the two of you can make a run for it. Nice try, only it won't work, so knock it off.
Ed and I were going to be married, Johnny, and the shock of his death...
I said skip it.
Ed used to talk about you. He told me you were this way. Hard and cold and ruthless.
Then he has no excuse. He knew what to expect.
But I didn't believe it. I didn't think anyone could be...
Yes, senor.
Oh, good morning. I don't believe you've met my companion.
I have not been so fortunate, senor.
This is Captain Garcia of the Panama Police, Mrs. Barrett.
Hello.
Greatly honored, senora.
Might be a good idea to take a careful look at her, Garcia. You will probably be arresting her in the next day or so as an accomplice to fraud.
Let us hope such regrettable necessity is not happen.
Thank you, Captain. I'm sure it won't. Mr. Dollar has a rather boorish sense of humor.
I comprehend, senora. Mr. Dollar, it is possible perhaps that I speak a little with you?
Yeah, sure. I imagine Mrs. Barrett will be happy to excuse me at this point.
Hasta la vista, senora.
Remember, Johnny, he was your friend.
I did not wish to mention this matter before the senora.
Oh?
I think it's better she's not here.
Hear what? Have you turned up something?
Si, senor. I have tell you, not even the little dog can hide from Garcia.
So?
We have located this man, Ed Morgan.
I got into the police car with Captain Garcia, and we drove out of town and followed the shoreline for about 6 miles. Then we pulled up near a cluster of rickety wharves built around the edge of a tiny inlet. There were numerous native fishing boats tied against the pilings, but no village, no shacks, nor any other sign of a habitation. Garcia cut the motor and lit a cigarette.
Pues aquí estamos. Here we are, senor.
Here? He's hiding out here?
Si, senor. He lives on one of the little fishing boats which are tied to the wharf. The number 3 one there, which is blue-painted, you see?
Yeah, I see it. Well, a place like this would be safer than a hotel. You're pretty sure it's him?
Pues, Miguel Ronesto, who is on the boat, said this man come out here 1 month ago. He paid Miguel much money just to live on the boat, tie up at shore. And he is like you described, senor. I think so is him.
All right. I'll go on board and talk to him. And I think I'd better go along, Garcia.
Whatever you wish, senor. I wait for you here.
Okay. Ed? Ed Morgan. Mm-hmm. Ed? I know you're here, so you might as well answer.
Cabin's unlocked. Come on down.
Been a long time, Ed.
Yeah, it has. Sorry the place is so littered up. Temporary quarters, you understand. Sit down.
Thanks.
Johnny, why did it have to be you?
It had to be somebody, Ed, sooner or later. You should have known that.
But not you. How'd you get onto me?
I traced Mrs. Barrett down here. I thought you were dead until last night.
She wasn't supposed to show here for 6 months. Last week, here she was. Couldn't wait.
Why did you do it, Ed?
You wouldn't understand. You've always had dames crazy about you without lifting a hand. But not me. This face always stopped them. Sure, I used to laugh about it, but... you just wouldn't understand.
And this woman was different, is that it?
Nikki fell as hard as I did. I didn't know women like her even existed. She's for me all the way.
Is she worth the price tag? $80,000?
Cut it, Johnny. It's not that way. It's just that Nikki had always lived well, and I had to live that way, too, in order to be around her. I got in further and further, and finally I was in too deep to pull out.
Did she know you were stealing from the company?
Not at first. The blame's all mine, Johnny, not hers.
You picked your own apples, that it?
Call it that. And I didn't spend all that money. We decided to get out of the country, start a new life together. I figured I'd need that much.
And Nikki agreed to that plan?
Sure. That's why she's here. She sold out and came on down.
Only she didn't, Ed. She still has her apartment in San Francisco.
You're wrong, Johnny. She sold her furniture, her clothes, everything.
The stuff is all there, Ed. I saw it.
You're lying, Johnny. She pulled stakes. She told me.
Okay, she told you. I guess you know why I'm here.
I know why you think you're here. Hold it, Johnny. Don't move. I've had this gun on you since you came on board.
I know you have. But I wonder if you'd really use it.
Don't try to find out. And don't tell me I'm in a spot. I know that. But I'm going on as far as I can. And if I have to kill to do it, then I'll kill.
Maybe I could have stopped him. Maybe he wouldn't have fired, I don't know. And for one reason or another, I didn't feel much like finding out. I let him go. He backed out of the cabin hatch and bolted it on the outside. I heard him cross the deck and run along the wharf. And I waited for Garcia to call out to challenge him. The only sound was the car motor starting up and speeding away. Then I heard somebody come running down the wharf.
Senor Dollar!
Get the door open, Garcia. Where is he? What happened?
He take the car, senor. It's me to blame. I am not alert. Before I know it...
Never mind. Where's the nearest telephone?
2 miles, senor.
2 miles? How do we get there?
But how else, senor? We walk?
Now, here is our star to tell you about tomorrow's final episode of this week's story.
Tomorrow, fate plays a devil's tune, collects a payment long overdue, and the music ends on a scream. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. Written by Les Crutchfield, it is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone. Be sure to join us tomorrow night, same time and station, for the next exciting episode of Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Hugh Brundage speaking. From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
Capitan Garcia Ramullo, senor.
Oh, Garcia.
Of the Panama Federal Police.
Tell me, have you...
Senor, the most intensive troubles are being extended in this matter.
Which means you haven't found him yet.
Every man of the police is active alert.
I'm happy to hear it.
You may rest assured, senor, that the capture of this dangerous Americano gangster is occur at any moment.
Have you found any trace of him?
Senor, I wish to advise you that the entire resource of my policia is at the disposal of our good neighbor of the north.
Thank you very much. Do you know where he's headed?
It is only by cooperation that our two great
Garcia.
nations... Si, senor?
Do you have any idea at all what's happened to Ed Morgan?
No, senor.
Tonight and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar, location Panama. To the Home Office, Eternity Mutual Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut. Assignment, the confidential matter. Expense account, final page. Item 15, $1.10, taxi from my hotel to Plaza Bolivar and the office of Captain Garcia, Commandante of Police. It had been over an hour and a half since I'd let Ed Morgan point a gun at me and escape from the tiny fishing boat where he'd been hiding out for the past month. I'd expected the police to capture him within 30 minutes. There were only 2 highways out, and they'd both been blockaded immediately. But somehow, Ed, driving a stolen police car, had escaped the net. In fact, he'd done more than merely escape, as I discovered when I walked into the massive stone police headquarters.
Ah, Senor Dollar, pleased to sit you down.
Thanks.
The most surprised thing is, of course, senor.
What do you mean?
You will remember you say it's a fine idea to keep watch at the Hotel of the Senora Barrett.
Yeah, I thought Ed might try to get in touch with her.
Bueno, see. So I do this thing. I send 2 men, and they watch for 1 hour. Que bobos, they're fools.
Why so?
They do not see the Senor Morgan. They do not see the Senora Barrett. But only after 1 hour do they think to talk with the manager. You know what he say?
What?
Senor Morgan come 5 minutes before they do, and he take the Senora away in the car.
What the devil for?
Quien sabe, senor.
Driving a stolen car and just 1 jump ahead of the police, and he risks his neck to go after her? Why?
Pues a veces el amor le vuelve loco, un hombre.
Meaning?
This love is sometime make a man crazy in the head.
I'll buy that one.
It's something I am not understand so good, senor.
What's that?
How is it you all know all about this criminal?
He wasn't always a criminal, Garcia. He was one of my best friends for 12 years.
Then I am much sympathy with you, senor. It's too unfortunate that you have the job for arresting.
Well, I didn't know he was alive when I took the job.
¿Qué dice?
The company ran an audit on his books and found an $80,000 shortage. I went to San Francisco to find out what happened to the money. Ed was supposedly dead at the time. We all thought so.
Then I do not understand why you have come here to Panama.
I came to talk to this Nicky Barrett, the woman he'd been running around with. I stumbled onto him by luck or accident or whatever you want to call it.
Qué curiosa es la vida. To live is like to fish, senor. One is never certain what he may pull up on the hook.
Well, I've pulled up one here and I'd like to throw it back. But I guess you don't have much choice when you're out.
Dispénseme, por favor. Bueno. ¿Eh? ¿Qué dice? Sí, yo sé. Cerca del mar. Santa madre, ¿qué tan lejos?
What is it, Garcia?
Ay, qué lástima. Sí, cuídelo bien. Venemos ahorita. Sí, adiós.
What's wrong? What's happened?
Senor Morgan and the senora, they have been found.
Where?
They have tried to escape by the old road on the cliff. It's abandoned, very dangerous. They are miss 1 bad curve and go into the ocean.
Into the ocean?
Si, senor. The car is under 10 meters of water. There is no sign of life.
Expense account item 16, $75. Charter fee on 1 power launch. This included the services of a diver and line tender. We were just plain lucky on this one. A salvage company happened to be working in the port and had a man and equipment free at the moment. We took off along the coastline, and in less than an hour, we dropped anchor over the wreck. The diver had been lowered beneath the surface. The sea was calm against the rocks, but the water wasn't clear enough to see more than just the outline of the car lying over 30 feet down on the bottom. While we waited for the diver to come back up, I glanced toward the high cliff towering above us. A month ago, there'd been another cliff like that, in San Francisco.
Like I say, senor, life is too strange sometimes.
So is death.
This man, this woman, they meet, they look one at each other, and what are they think?
A lot of things, maybe, but not that they'd end up here, like this.
How true it is, senor. Who can ever know if one day he will come
Wait a second. The diver's coming up.
See, it's too bad he doesn't have the system of telephone. In this case, we can talk from the water.
We didn't have time to rig it up. Well, we'll soon know, I guess.
I am most sorry for you, Senor Dollar, that your friend has to die like this.
I faced the idea of his death a month ago and accepted it. Then I had to face some other things about him. Another shark now doesn't seem to have much meaning. Just a matter of... Hey, there's the diver. He's up at the rail. Hey, let me give you a hand with that faceplate. I'll work on this side.
It's very complicated, this diving business.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of an old-fashioned rig. They got suits now with self-contained oxygen, independent control. Stuff the frogmen developed during and after the war.
No me diga, qué fantástico.
Yeah, it is. All right. There we go. All right, now, what'd you find?
Oh, let me get a breath of raw air first. Oh, gotta get that compressor motor fixed. Throws down more CO than oxygen.
Come on. How'd it look?
Dollar, it's a mess. That car must have rolled over 12 times coming down that cliff. All cracked up.
Yeah, but what about...
One door's half off and flattened back. All the glass is slivered. Looks like it had been bombed instead of just wrecked.
Senor, is the...
Yeah, the body of the woman is inside, but there's no chance of getting it out without dropping a grappler and seeing if we can roll the car over.
And the man? Is he...
No, just the woman. That's the only one down there.
Again. The same pattern. A car plunging off a cliff into the ocean, and a body missing from it. But this time I was sure it wasn't faked. Ed wouldn't have done a thing like that to Nicky. Not to Nicky. And yet his body was not in the wreck. I looked again at the high wall of the cliff, steep but not vertical. A car would have rolled and bounced coming down, as the diver had said. And one door was torn half off. The glass was smashed out. It was a possibility. As far as I could see, the only possibility. I had the captain run the launch in close. Then I jumped onto the rocks and started to climb. The slope was gentler than it had looked from the water, and the surface was broken by ravines. Clumps and thickets of tropical plants clung to the shelves, and the going was rough, and a long ways from impossible. I'd made it halfway to the top when I found him, jammed in the trough of a gully. Broken, badly hurt, but still alive. Barely alive.
That you, Johnny?
Yeah. Easy now, Ed. Let me get a foothold here.
We didn't make it, Johnny.
You didn't have a chance, Ed. You should have realized.
I know. Maybe I knew all along.
Better not try to talk.
It's kind of funny when you think about it. I mean, what happened here, just like we did it in San Francisco. Only this time it's real. Lost control.
Yeah, this time it's real. Now, you lie still there. There are police on the road up above. We'll get some ropes down, have you out of here before you know it.
Forget it, Johnny. It's no use. I'm all smashed inside. I can't even move.
All right, maybe you got a broken bone or two, but that's no reason to...
Don't lie to me, Johnny. I'm dying. We both know it. Am I right or not?
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right.
Doesn't matter anymore.
Oh, Ed.
Tell me, is Nicky...
She's dead.
No. You're right about her, Johnny.
Forget it, will you? Forget it.
I made her come with me in the car. Held a gun on her. And she got mad. Scared. She spilled the whole story.
Ed, it doesn't make any difference now.
It's funny. I thought she came down here before she was supposed to, because she just couldn't wait to join me. But she only came to get the rest of the money. She wasn't planning to stay.
Listen to me, Ed, this kind of talk
She didn't love me. Never did. She admitted it right before we went off the cliff. But I thought she did, Johnny, for a while. And nobody else ever let me even think it.
Please, Ed, why don't you try to forget about it?
You know something, Johnny?
What?
If I was to go back, I think I'd do the same thing again. Nicky, the way she could be when she wanted to, it gets you. Got me anyway. It's crazy. Maybe there's just no answer for a guy like me. Except this.
I don't know, Ed. I'm not a judge.
Kind of figures, you know. Nicky dying, too. I bought her and paid for her. I at least ought to be able to take her with me. After all,
Easy now.
The money. What's left of it, it's inside my coat. Give it to Moore. Tell him I'm sorry. Make him understand.
He will, Ed.
You too, Johnny. I'm sorry. I guess I didn't know what else to say.
Oh, forget it.
But I still think I'd do it all over again. Crazy, huh?
There are times we all go a little crazy.
I got no right to ask, but if you would, I'd sure appreciate it. I mean, if you'd just shake hands with me.
Oh, sure, Ed. Here you go.
It's funny, I can't find your hand. It's dark. I can't see where...
Right here, Ed. Right here.
Oh.
All right, shake, you ugly old son of a gun.
Thanks, Johnny. Thanks for not...
So long, Ed. Item 17, $487.25. Hotel and incidentals in Panama and transportation back to the States. Expense account total $912.61. Am forwarding under separate cover by American Express, insured $62,112.30. End of account, enter report. Remarks? No, Mort, not on this one. Ed Morgan was my friend. The report stands. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Now, here is our star to tell you about next week's story.
Next week, the imperfect alibi matter. A real weirdie, where a big lie turns out to be the one real truth in the case. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. Written by Les Crutchfield. It is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone. Heard in our cast were Virginia Gregg, Jack Edwards, Russell Thorson, Thurley Mitchell, Stacey Harris, Bob Miller, Harry Bartell, Victor Perrin, and Frank Gerstle. Musical supervision by Amerigo Marino. Be sure to join us on Monday night, same time and station, for another exciting story of Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Hugh Brundage speaking.
From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
Johnny, I was afraid you might be away for the weekend.
Who's that?
Byron Kay at Intercoastal Maritime and Life.
Oh, hello, By. How are things in Boston?
In Boston, fine. In Cod Harbor, terrible.
Who's this?
Meg McCarthy, who runs an eating place there at the harbor.
Murder, mayhem, arson, or what?
Right now, it's or what. But if you don't do something, and fast, it may be all three. Can you come over and see me?
Now, By?
I know it's Saturday afternoon, Johnny, but this needs fast action. Will you?
By?
Goodbye.
No, By. Listen, you... Dollar, you're a sucker.
Tonight, and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator...
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar, location Cod Harbor, Massachusetts. To the Intercoastal Maritime and Life Insurance Company. Following is an accounting of expenses incurred during my investigation of the Meg's Palace matter. Expense account item 1, $7.30. Cab from my apartment, train fare and incidentals to Boston. Byron Kay was a good insurance broker, and I figured he wouldn't have called me over a weekend unless it was pretty important.
To get right to the point, Johnny, insurance on the Palace is only for $15,000.
Wait a minute, By. What is this Palace, a fishing boat?
No, it's what Meg McCarthy calls a restaurant, right down on the dock.
Cod Harbor, you say?
That's right.
Well, what seems to be the trouble over there that couldn't wait till after the weekend?
Well, like I told you, this character, Meg McCarthy, runs a so-called restaurant down on the docks, the Palace. I sold her $15,000 insurance on it. And, Johnny, it's quite a place.
What do you mean by that?
We also carry $25,000 straight life insurance on Meg herself. Separate policy, of course.
Which one are you worried about, Vi?
Both, I think.
Huh?
Matter of fact, the more I think about it, the gladder I am that she didn't fall for my pitch when I tried to get her to increase the coverage on the cafe. If she had, our necks would really be out.
Well, what's the matter? Isn't it worth $15,000 now?
Oh, sure, at least. Even if it doesn't look it. You know, the stoves, equipment, and all that sort of stuff are in the coverage, too.
Then I'm afraid I don't see what
Thing is this, Johnny. Meg has been threatened.
By whom? How?
Who knows? Anyhow, she's notified me that there have been a couple of attempts to set fire to her place. Since she lives upstairs in it, that means danger to her own life, too.
Uh-huh. And the whole $40,000 is at stake.
Yes. Will you go up there right away and see what you can do?
Today?
Tomorrow?
Sunday?
Look, maybe you can get in some fishing. I understand you're quite a fisherman.
Oh, now, the last 3 times I was promised fishing while working on a case, all I did was cut bait.
Proposition. If you don't get in at least a full day's fishing trip while you're up there, I'll double whatever you line up on your expense account.
Sounds mighty tempting.
How about it, Johnny?
Okay, Vi, you asked for it. Item 2, $11.95, transportation back to Hartford, then on to Cod Harbor the next morning. Fine way to spend a nice warm Sunday. Nice place, too, if you lost your sense of smell. There were 2 or 3 dozen fishing boats of all shapes and sizes tied up at the long dock and piers that comprised the important part of the village. For housing, there was a scattering of weather-beaten shacks, 1 store. Meg's Palace turned out to be the biggest, most disreputable-looking of the dockside eating places, and since there was a closed sign on the front door, I went around to the back.
Did I tell you get off the clean scrub floor of my lovely joint of water is basically below? I'm sick and tired of looking at that whole...
No, look here, Meg. I just come back to apologize for the
Well, the next time that mangy, curly crew of the Lily Ann comes in here and gets drunk and broads and carries on and busts up me fine glassware and china, to say nothing of a couple of wooden chairs and a fine
listen
table.
to me, darling.
Don't you darling me, you pig-faced squint
No, Meg, put down the frying pan.
No, sir, not until you get your filthy hide out of here. I'm running a respectable joint, and the likes of you and the ragtail crew of yours have got no place in it. What's more, and furthermore, I won't have you around.
I only come
get.
to pay for the damage my boys did last night. Now, look
Hey,
here.
that's a laugh. Pay for the loss of me dignity, to say nothing of me
Nick,
trade.
you little buttercup, please.
Now get out of here, Willie. Get out.
Okay. Here's your money, Meg.
Who wants your dirty, offensive money? Get!
Meg, put down the frying pan.
I'll put it down, Willie boy, if you don't get out here. I'll
Meg,
your head.
no.
Get now before I don't get out of here, Willie. Keep
Excuse me, Miss McCarthy?
Ain't he a darling? Ain't he the sweetest man you ever did see?
Huh? The man you just threw out of here?
Not only comes in to apologize, but brings the money to pay for the damage his pranking boys done last night when they were celebrating the big catch they made. Lovely bunch of lads they are, too, every one of them. As loyal to Willie Boy. Now, who the devil are you? And what's the big idea of barging in here on a Sunday when anybody with eyes in his stupid head can see that the place is closed up?
Now,
Are your eyes so blind in your head you couldn't see the sign out front?
I saw it.
And sneaking in here the back way this way. Who do you think you are?
I wasn't
now
sneaking.
Get out and leave a lady alone of a Sunday. Go on!
Don't get tough with me, Meg McCarthy.
Huh?
Just put down that pot and shut up for a minute while I tell you why I'm here. Put it down.
Shades of me dear departed overbearing husband, yes, sir. After all, I should have noticed you're a gent standing by the way you done while me and Bill was at its helter and skelter. Oh, but he's a dear one, ain't he?
Yeah, well, at this point, I wouldn't know. But from what I saw a minute ago...
Oh, don't let that fool you, dearie. We're in love, me and Willie boy. Ain't he a living doll?
Meg.
A fine, fine husband he's going to make me, too. That's why I made him the beneficiary of my life insurance policy.
That's exactly what I want to talk to you about.
Then go ahead and talk. What's stopping you standing there like a banty rooster that doesn't know...
Will you shut up?
Oh, well, of course I will, dearie. And I'm begging your humble pardon. But if there's anything I hate, it's a lily-livered man that hasn't...
Meg.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Then listen.
Yes, sir.
My name is Dollar, Johnny Dollar. I'm an insurance investigator.
Insurance investigator, eh? Well, in spite and despite of your pretty clothes and pleasing manner, I don't want any of already got.
No, you don't understand.
I
Meg.
got all I can handle.
I'm just...
And from the looks of things, these past couple
Will you
of...
shut up a minute?
Of course, dearie. I'm sorry.
You call the insurance company, Mr. Byron Kay, at Intercoastal Maritime.
Oh, yes, dear little pasty-faced Byron boy. Why, do you know if he'd had half the guts and get of a he-man, he would have sold me twice the insurance he did?
Well, that's not quite the way he told it to me.
Well, it's the way I'm telling it to you. Oh, what am I going to do, darling, if they wreck my place the way they're trying?
Oh, this Willie boy, as you call him, who was just in here.
That's effeminate. What? He's Captain Billy Morgan, bitter to you and any man what calls him
Oh,
Willie.
put it down, will you? And stop yapping your head off and answer my question.
Yes, sir.
Now, is Captain Bill Morgan one of the people you suspect of trying to wreck this ugly-looking hash house?
Oh, I love you, boy. You talk like a real sweet, overbearing man.
Then answer my question.
Well, of course he ain't. Willie boy wouldn't hurt me any more than I'd touch a hair of his pretty head if he had a hair on top of it.
All right, then who?
Johnny boy, there's a dozen of 'em like to see Meg's palace burned to the ground. Blast their black thieving souls.
Why?
Because I give 'em the best and the most food in the harbor. That's what the man gets here. So what happens to the silver plate in Ernie's Manor House and Irving's chop suey joint? Well, I'm putting them out of business, that's what.
So you think they're trying to put you out of business?
Think it, I know it. So I telephoned that sniveling, lop-eared Byron Kay to send somebody down here and make him stop it, before he had to pay off a lot of insurance on it and maybe even on me. Why else do you think?
There have been some attempts to set the place on fire, I understand.
Why else do you think a lady like myself would take to sleeping on the bar down here every night, getting a creak in my sacred iliop? But I'm getting sick and fed up with it.
Don't know that I blame you. Now, look, will you...
Trying to keep awake all night every night to keep them from burning it out from under me and me with it is making a fair shadow of me former self out of me. I'm losing me strength.
But not your aim. Look, while we talk, I'll help you clear up some of this.
Well, the devil you will. It's not the man's job, especially since you ain't romantically inclined towards me.
But you would let Bill Morgan clean up for you, huh?
He was the cause of it, wasn't he? So if he and his boys don't show up before nightfall and take care of it, so help me, I'll keel-haul them every one. Besides, if he's going to be me old man when the fishing season's done, he's got to know how to keep in line. Now.
You say there are people you suspect of trying to fire this building.
3.
All right, 3. Now, who are they? The owners of the other restaurants here on the dock?
Aye. First, there's Clem Harris, what runs the Silver Plate. Oh, and a sly one he is.
Yeah, what do you mean?
He's too soft and polite and soft-spoke. Me, I never trust a man unless he talks up like a man. Yeah, I guess that's why I like you, dear.
Well, who are the others?
Ernie Turner at the Manor House Cafe.
Oh, yeah. Is that the big place down at the other end?
The little hole in the wall next to the bait stand. And half the time the customers don't know whether they're getting bad food or thawed-out bait. And the third one.
Yeah?
It's that stubborn mule that runs Irving's chop suey joint.
Irving who? What's his last name?
Irving? His name's Tony.
His name... Now, wait a minute, will you please...
Sure. Tony Portino, Italian.
Then why is it called... Why a chop suey place?
If anybody has eyes, he would have saw how the sign was changed. First the Chinese had it with chop suey.
Yeah?
Then came Irving with kosher, so he added his name to it, and now it's Tony.
Well, then why...
Only there wasn't any more room left on the sign, so stop complaining.
Okay, Meg, you win. But have you any specific reason to suspect any one of them?
One of them? I suspect them all, the dirty conniving.
Why?
Because they're a dirty conniving... I'll tell you why. Because they won't sell out to me. Because they all 3 keep open competing with me, and that's 3 against 1, so they're a dirty conniving...
All right, you said that.
Well, aren't they? How would
All right.
Yes, sir. I love it when you speak to me that way, Johnny boy.
So you said. Now, I asked you if you have any specific reason for suspecting any one or all of them.
Well, of course I have, on account of the threats they sent.
How do you know they sent them?
Because I suspect them, that's why. And what happens 3 times they try to set fire to my luck.
Meg, you don't have one bit of actual evidence against any of them, do you?
Well,
do you?
No. But I suspect the dirty conniving...
Hold it, please. Are you sure those fires weren't accidental?
accidental.
Well, with all the dirt and grease you leave around this
In
shack.
the middle of the night with a stove fire banked like I've been doing it for 20 years, and with all the fires starting outside where they have no business. Look, Johnny boy, I'll show you where they started outside.
Well, now that's a good idea, because so far I confess I can't get very much alarmed over what's happening.
Don't the whole town know I'm closed on Sundays? Hello, and what kind of a blubber-headed income-poop would be calling Meg's Palace on a Sunday when everybody knows...
I want Johnny Dollar.
Huh? Oh, of course. The gentleman's right here. It's for you, Johnny boy.
Oh? Hello, Johnny Dollar.
We know why you're here, Dollar,
Oh, yeah? Who's we?
but you won't be here long, understand?
Well, now that's a matter of opinion, isn't it?
Either you go quiet the way you came, or you go in a long wooden box. Get it?
What is it, Johnny boy?
Come on, Meg. Let's get to work.
Now, here's our star to tell you about tomorrow's episode of this week's story.
Tomorrow, well, they say that darkness can cover a multitude of sins. It can also cover a strong man armed with a deadly weapon. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. It is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone, who also wrote tonight's story. Be sure to join us tomorrow night, same time and station, for the next exciting episode of Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Roy Rowan speaking. From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
Byron Kay in Boston, Johnny.
Hi.
The operator had quite a time locating you.
I don't see why I'm in the only available room for rent here in Cod Harbor.
Huh? Well, she said she was ringing Meg's Palace Restaurant.
That's where I am. Room's right above the place.
Well, tell me, have you found out whether it's true somebody's trying to burn up that joint and put Meg out of business?
Not only that, Boy, but whoever's behind the attempts to get her out of the way has threatened to get me.
Hey, you want some help?
Yeah, I want you to send me something by truck soon as possible.
Huh?
And I want to be sure it arrives here quietly at night so that nobody in this little fishing village knows it arrives.
Holy smoke, what?
Listen carefully, Boy, and I'll tell you. I want you to send me 6 letters.
Tonight, and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar, location Cod Harbor, Massachusetts. To the Intercoastal Maritime and Life Insurance Company, Boston. Assignment, the Meg's Palace Matter. Expense account continued. Expense account item... Well, since you're paying for and sending that batch of fire extinguishers, Byron, I can hardly charge them to my expense account, can I? But I have a sneaking suspicion they might be mighty important. A cursory inspection of this tiny fishing community has revealed no sign of a firehouse. Nothing, in fact, but some hose connections for cleaning off the docks. And after the threats Meg McCarthy has received, plus a couple of attempts to fire up this disreputable-looking establishment of hers, well, I guess I still have some Boy Scout blood in my veins. In view of the threat to me, I figured it might be a good idea to consult the local authorities. I learned a long time ago that it's a good plan to enlist their cooperation when working in a strange, small community. Inquiries from some of the fishermen vending their nets spread out on the long wharf led me to a small, shabby, unmarked frame shack that stood about a block away from the waterfront.
Come in.
Mr. Beasley?
That's right. Oh, what's your name?
Johnny Dollar.
Dollar, hmm? Okay, what do you want?
Well, you're the chief of police, I understand.
Acting chief of police?
Oh.
Acting mayor, too, an acting judge, acting town clerk, acting just about anything else you could want.
I don't get it.
Well, I don't know why not. Officially, I guess Cod Harbor's just a part of Barnesboro, a couple of miles inland. We're so small and we're not incorporated like most towns, so we just have to be kind of self-sufficient unto ourselves. You see what I mean? And you know something? It works out pretty good.
Yeah, well, I guess it's as acting chief of police that I've come to see you.
Yeah, what about?
The Meg's Palace Cafe.
Yeah, and you take any stock in Meg's talk about somebody threatening to burn up that cockroach-loaded dump she calls a restaurant?
I'm representing the insurance company that holds $15,000 insurance on it.
Ever come to your mind, Mr. Dollar, that Meg her own self might have set the fires to collect that insurance?
Call for help as a cover-up? Yeah, the thought has entered my mind.
Just crazy enough to do a thing like that, too.
Hasn't she been to you for help?
She told me.
Oh, what sort of evidence, one way or another, have you turned up?
Dollar, I haven't looked for any.
Yeah, what?
The less I meddle in their affairs, the less trouble I'll have with the folks here in Cod Harbor.
Oh, hey, now, wait a minute. For a mayor and police chief and so on, you don't seem to be very concerned about these people of yours.
So, maybe I'm not. What's the difference?
Well, look here, if you...
Yeah, you know, unless something serious happened, like a murder or
a fire that destroyed Meg's Palace and maybe half the docks. Don't you think that sort of thing is serious?
Well, yeah, if it happens. Then I'd probably have to call in the regular appointed authorities over to Barnesboro. But there hasn't been any fire yet. Not any real one. So why get your dander up?
Well, I'll be. Look, with so little concern about the place, how did you ever get all those jobs?
Easy. Lost my schooner out on the banks last fall. So for want of something better, I just took it. I took them all. Why not? The town feeds and bores me, and I like it. So?
Real soft, lazy, good-for-nothing life, huh?
Sure. Now, why don't you be a good boy, Dollar, and leave things be around here? Stop wasting my time.
Well, just let me take enough of your valuable time to ask a couple of questions.
Sure. Go ahead. No harm in asking.
I want to know about some of the people here in Cod Harbor.
Like who?
Clem Harris, for one.
Careful, boy. That's my cousin.
Oh.
Who else?
Ernie Turner and Tony Fortino.
Oh. On account of them's the three that run the other dirty bites along the docks, huh?
Yeah. I'd like a rundown on all three of them.
Easy.
Yeah?
Yeah. Go talk to them.
Oh, now, wait a minute.
Easiest way I know of for you to find out all about them.
Well, you're a lot of help.
Dollar, like I said, we're kind of self-sufficient unto ourselves around here. We like it that way. And that's just another way of saying we don't like strangers coming here and messing around in our affairs.
Well, that was pretty definitely that. It was getting quite late, and I decided I'd better postpone any interviews with Meg's business rivals until the following morning. Besides, as I walked along the wharf, I noticed that they were closed. Then I remembered somebody else I wanted to talk to, the beneficiary of Meg McCarthy's life insurance policy, the master of the fishing boat, Lily Ann, Captain Billy Morgan. But the Lily Ann, tied up at her berth, was dark and empty. Well, if anyone knew where Captain Billy was, it'd be Meg herself. So I walked the boards back to Meg's Palace. What greeted me as I opened the back door of the place was truly a sight to behold.
Over there with that hose, you scum of a land-lovingly. Over there in the corner, can't you see? What's the matter with you blinking eyeball?
Standing in the center of the floor, brandishing a moth-eaten feather duster as if it were a club, stood Captain Billy Morgan, shouting orders to three men who were cleaning up the mess of pots and pans and broken crockery left over from Meg McCarthy's temper tantrum a short while earlier, when she belabored this same Captain Billy for a little celebration he and his crew had in their place the night before. Belabored? It looked like she must have thrown one of everything in the joint at him.
Bill! Hey, Captain Billy! Hey! Oh, it's you, huh? Seen you here earlier today when Meg throwed me out.
Looks to me like you weren't all she threw.
Yes, sir. Oh, she's a living dog. Hey, say, ain't you the insurance man? She telephoned to help her find out who's trying to burn her out of here. Name's Johnny Dollar, ain't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Captain, I'd like to ask you a favor.
Charlie, you yellow-bellied, bug-eyed, bandy-waisted. Don't throw that crash in the corner. What's the matter with you? Sorry, Mr. Dollar, but I guess the boys don't like working at night when they got to be up and aboard Lillian and headed out for the fishing banks by 3 a.m. in the morning.
Don't blame
them. We couldn't leave Meg's place in a mess like this, now could we? After all, she's going to have to serve us coffee and sinkers before we go.
Where is she?
Upstairs. Has been for the last hour.
In her room?
In that room she's renting out to you. Figured like maybe you could stand some cleaning up and debugging, I guess.
You know something? She figured right.
Avast there with the mop hole here, I'll wring it around your bloody neck. And swab off them tables while it's ready. Can't you see the mess you left on them? Now, what can I do for you, Mr. Dollar?
Well, look, why don't you and I go into the kitchen, Captain, where we can hear ourselves think?
Well, sure, why not? All right, now you keep out at your sow-bellied lunkhead. And if the joint ain't clean and tidy when I come back, I'll blast you all over the least upper. Real fine bunch of boys I got there, ain't they?
I'll buy it, are they?
You bet your sweet living life they are. Finest crew on any boat in the harbor. Charlie, Oley, and Montgomery. Now, what was it you wanted, Mr. Dollar? You found out anything about who's causing all the worries to my lover girl?
Not very much yet.
Well, I hope you do.
Do you?
Huh? I don't get you.
I'm going to be honest with you. Lay all the cards right on the table.
Well, that's the only way, I always say.
All right. I'm just as concerned about Meg herself as I am about this cafe.
Sure you are. Me too.
Now, whether you like it or not, I have to consider the fact that you are the beneficiary of Meg's $25,000 life insurance policy. If anything were to happen to her...
Why, sure, I see what you mean. You bet your life I see what you mean. Why, you blasted land-loving son of a dirty yellow sculpin.
Take it easy, Captain.
Take it easy. You
Pipe
trying
down.
to say I hurt one single hair make my cut? Dollar, you make cracks like that, I'll swab the decks with that ornery hide of yours and feed it. Put him up! Put him up, Dollar! You want to talk to me like that?
I
You
said
put him
pipe
up!
down, Captain. Let's talk sense a minute.
Talk sense, yeah, but don't you go implicating that
I didn't imply a thing yet.
Well, I warn you, you
Just
don't.
a minute there, Captain Billy Morgan, just a minute. Who do you think you're talking to like that, the guest of me humble establishment?
Well, I'm sorry, Meg, darling, but he
And
was
why
talking
ain't
like...
you in there helping those poor boys of yours with the cleaning up?
Well, but they're almost finished up, Meg, me darling.
Besides, unless you ought to get out of here and get your sleep, you'll not be worth your salt on the boat tomorrow.
Meg, I'd like to talk to Captain Billy.
Tomorrow. Go out on the boat with him in the morning and you'll all have plenty of time to talk.
Well, I want to talk to
Willie
him now.
boy, get out with them. Go on.
Oh, yes, my dear. And, I'll see you at the dock at 3 in the morning.
Well, now, wait a minute.
Also, Johnny boy, you go out with him. It'll give me a chance to fix your room up real nice for you like it should be for a gentleman like yourself.
Okay, Meg. Come to think of it, I was promised a fishing trip on this case.
Anyways, I'll not be worrying about any fires tonight with you staying here. So if you don't mind, I'll retire to my bed and see you at breakfast time.
Okay. Maybe I can help Billy's crew finish cleaning up in there.
Oh, don't you lift a finger. 'Twas at Willie boy I told them plates and things so him and his crew can clean it up. Good night, Johnny boy. There's food in the icebox and your bed's all made when you're ready to retire.
I stood there for a moment, smiling after her. Then I decided I'd take her advice, that instead of helping the men clean up the cafe, I'd get a breath of fresh air before hitting the sack. The moon was just a thin sliver in the eastern sky, and the stars twinkled merrily in the broad, clear expanse overhead. The cottages of the peaceful little fishing village were dark. Along the docks at the waterfront, the fishing boats playfully nudged each other as they slowly and quietly swung and rolled on the gently heaving water. Their masts and rigging formed an intricate, ever-changing pattern against the occasional beam from the lighthouse in the point as it lazily swept across the night. Somewhere, far out on the landward breeze, an occasional seabird called. It was all so peaceful and serene that I couldn't help wondering how trouble could ever come to a... Then I saw it. A slight movement at the front corner of the old building. A silhouette hunched over, tensely watching the front door, waiting for whom? Slowly, as quietly as possible, I crept up on whoever it was, hoping in the dim light to recognize him or her before I was discovered. Softly, I passed the side door. I could still hear the members of the crew inside at their work. But in my concentration on the person out front, I was too slow in my reaction when that side door suddenly opened behind me. Huh? What? Who are you? Oh, no, you! Oh! And very suddenly, it got very dark.
Now, here's our star to tell you about tomorrow's episode of this week's story.
Tomorrow, a trip to sea on the Lily Ann that starts out like an ordinary fishing trip. But somewhere on board lurks a man with murder in his heart. And his next intended victim, me. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. It is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone, who also wrote this week's story. Be sure to join us tomorrow night, same time and station, for the next exciting episode of Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar. Roy Rowan speaking. From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
Mr. Dollar?
Oh, listen, it's after midnight, and I don't feel
This
so
is
good.
Tim Beasley. I want to talk to you.
Oh, the oh-so-very uncooperative mayor, chief of police, and general do nothing in this town.
Now, just a minute.
Now, you just a minute. I asked you for help this afternoon in finding out who's threatening to put Meg McCarthy in a restaurant out of business.
Dollar.
But what do I get? A snide warning from you that the people of Cod Harbor don't want outsiders messing in their affairs. Well, I don't believe it.
If you'll only listen to me, I want to help
Then
you.
why weren't you here a little while ago when somebody slugged me?
I was.
What?
Who do you think picked you up in that alley and put you to bed at Meg's place?
You?
You want to come over here and talk to me now? I know it's late.
Okay, Beasley. If my head stops spinning long enough, I'll be right over.
Tonight, and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar, location, Cod Harbor, Massachusetts. To the Intercoastal Maritime and Life Insurance Company, Boston. Assignment, the Meg's Palace Matter. Expense account continued. Expense account? Well, so far here in Cod Harbor, there's been little need for it. Meg McCarthy had given me a small room above a restaurant and provided all the food I could eat. My own 2 feet were the only means of transportation. The only shops were along the waterfront. They were suppliers to the boats tied up at the various docks. And a motley lot of boats they were. Some were big schooners dating back to the last century and still carrying sail. There were power boats of all shapes and sorts and sizes, from 18-footers with one-lung gasoline engines to big 60 and 70-foot diesel jobs. Trouble of the sort I'd come to investigate seemed out of place in this otherwise peaceful little village.
Come in, Mr. Dollar.
So, you've suffered a change of heart, huh, Beasley? And you've decided to cooperate.
Yeah, that's about the best way to put it, I guess. See, it's
Now,
this way.
wait. Before we go any further, what was this bit about picking me up after I got socked on the head a while ago?
Listen, Mr. Dollar, after you left here this afternoon, I got to thinking. Maybe I was wrong in giving you the back of my hand, and maybe you was right in walking out mad like you did.
Well, how would you feel? The insurance company back in Hartford gets word from Meg McCarthy that somebody's threatening to burn up that joint on the waterfront she calls a restaurant. It's insured for $15,000, and she's insured for $25,000.
I know. Well, you see, it's this way.
And when I get here, I learn that somebody has already tried a couple of times to set fire to the place. All right. I learned a long time ago that in a case like this, it's smart to enlist the help of the local authorities. Here in Cod Harbor, those authorities all seem to boil down to you. Why, I will never know.
Yeah, like I told you. But now listen.
And what do I get from you? The cold shoulder, the back of your hand, as you put it.
I gotta explain to you, Mr. Dollar.
Well, then go ahead and explain, and believe me, brother, it better be good.
Well, there probably ain't another village like this in the whole country, see? Technically, we're supposed to be part of Barnesboro, a few miles inland. But we've always left them alone, and they've always left us alone. Any trouble happens, we settle it amongst ourselves, and because we're such a small place, it's get along with everybody or get out, see? So we just don't have no trouble. Not of any account, that is, unless it's somebody comes in from outside and makes it for us. You understand, Mr. Dollar?
Are you forgetting it was one of your own townspeople who asked me to come here, and for her own protection?
That's what I got to thinking about after you left. So I decided maybe I better talk to you. And, well, that's how I happened to go over to Meg's place tonight.
Was that you I saw in the shadows out by the front door?
Yes, sir. I was waiting for Captain Billy Morgan and his crew to finish cleaning up the place for Meg. And I was going to go in and talk to you. And that's the truth, Mr. Dollar.
Go on.
Well, I just got there when I heard a noise out at the side of the cafe like a fight. Of course, it was dark.
There was no fight. Somebody came out the side door from behind me and knocked me on the head.
Yeah. So I took you up and put you on your bed and gave you time to get your senses back and then telephoned to you.
Uh-huh. You sure it was you out at the front of the cafe?
Oh, no, Mr. Dollar. You trying to implicate maybe it was me that give you a belaying pin over the head?
Was that what hit me, Beasley? A belaying pin?
Well, something hit you and I just...
Okay. I'll take your word it wasn't you, for the time being.
I swear, Mr. Dollar, by all...
All right, then, listen.
Yeah?
I heard that side door open just before I started seeing stars.
Huh? Yeah?
That means whoever struck me must have come from inside the cafe.
Say.
Yeah, that's right. The only people inside were Captain Morgan and the crew of his fishing boat.
You sure?
I'm sure, because I was in there myself just a minute before. Just Billy Morgan and his 3 men.
Where was Meg?
She'd gone up to bed. I just stepped outside for a breath of air.
Ole?
Huh?
Ole Jensen, first mate.
Yeah, I heard Captain Billy call one of them Ole. Last name's Jensen, huh?
And then there's Charlie. Charlie Buttons, the deckhand, and Montgomery, the engineer.
Well?
No, not one of them could have done it.
Isn't that like saying I didn't get hit? One of them must have done it.
No, sir, Mr. Dollar, it just couldn't make any sense.
All right, tell me this. Are any of them related to the guys who run the other cafes along the wharf?
No.
But you are, aren't you, Beasley?
Huh?
To Clem Harris at the Silver Plate, or is it the Greasy Plate? Anyway, he's your cousin, isn't he?
I told you that. But if you think he had anything...
All right, now I don't know what I think. But let me tell you this. If you have suffered this big change of heart, it's about time you started proving it.
I'll do anything you say, Mr. Dollar.
All right. Meg seems to think the threats and attempts to burn down her place came from her competitors.
Well, I know she does, but she's...
Now, in a couple of hours, I'm taking off for the fishing banks with Captain Morgan and his crew. Maybe I'll be able to spot which of his men laid me out in the alley, if it was one of them. Meantime, you see if you can dig up anything that would put a finger at the other cafe owners. That means Ernie at the Manor House, Tony who runs Irving's Chop Suey joint, and your cousin, Clem Harris.
Okay, Mr. Dollar. I'll do it.
Hey, by the way, did you ever check their handwriting against the letters Meg received?
Well, no, I never quite got around to it.
I don't think you ever got around to doing anything.
But it's such an easy job.
Well, do it. Get the letters from Meg and check them.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to try to get a couple hours sleep before we take off on the Lily Ann.
Yes, sir.
The big lazy slob. The first time I met him, he'd actually boasted about his soft job. About how nicely he could live in the town without having to lift a finger. Oh, sure, the sudden change of heart may have been genuine, but I wouldn't have bet on it. And I still had no proof it wasn't he who slugged me. And one of Meg's rival eateries was run by his cousin. But then everything indicated that whoever struck me had come from inside her own cafe. So I decided it was more important than ever that I go on the next day's fishing trip. Back in my room on the second floor of Meg's palace, I fell asleep the minute my head hit the pillow. And I could have sworn it was only a second later that... Yeah. Oh, who is it? What is it?
Time to get up and out. What do you think it is?
Huh?
Who else? You're going out with the boys. Just get them lazy bones of yours up out of that bed.
Oh, but it's still pitch dark.
Are you decent? Well, whether you are or whether you ain't, it's time you was up. Here's the light for you.
Oh, turn this thing off.
Now, here's some coffee. Take a saucer or two. It'll choke you. It's that strong, but it'll wait. Johnny boy, what happened to you?
Oh, just what it looks like.
But your head.
Somebody just got real friendly with a belaying pin right after you went to bed.
They come up here and attacked you?
No, it was outside, out by the side door.
I'll kill whoever done that to you, Johnny boy. So help me, I'll find out who done that. You sure you want to get up and go out to the banks? Maybe you...
No, I'll be all right. And I think it's pretty important I go out with Captain Billy and his boys. Because I have a sneaking suspicion one of them may have done this.
Why, them dirty, conniving... Oh, no, Johnny, you must be wrong.
Oh?
Why, don't you know, darling, that's the finest crew of men in all of Cod Harbor.
I'm not so sure.
But then you mean you think one of them could also be behind trying to burn me down? And maybe me with it?
You can be mighty sure I'm going to try to find out.
Oh, Johnny boy, I pray that you're thinking wrong. Anyhow, if you're going with them, well, up and out with you. By the time you're in your clothes, I'll have some grits on the table for you. Eggs and pork chops and donuts and jam and hot cakes.
I met the crew of the Lily Ann at that breakfast. Breakfast? Considering the amount of food set before them and the way they piled into it, you'd think those 4 men hadn't eaten for a month. And I must confess, there was nothing about them that looked like cause for suspicion. First there was Charlie, a tall, brown-eyed, husky young fella, alert and pleasant, with a sense of humor, and he was obviously liked by the others.
I don't know, Mr. Dollar. I think you just got to dreaming about some nice, pretty gal, and when you reached out and tried to grab her, you fell out of bed, and that's the way you got banged up.
Montgomery, a bit older, the man who was responsible for the engines on the boat. Gray-haired, lean, wiry, with narrow fingers that looked clumsy and somehow never made a clumsy move. Whose blue eyes looked straight at you when he spoke.
Don't you believe it? And you can blow me down, Mr. Dollar, if that ain't the most dastardly thing I ever heard of here in Cod Harbor. Now, you'd best stick close to us that's your friends whilst you're here. I said, friends of Meg McCarthy be friends of us.
Then Ollie Jensen, first mate, the oldest member of the crew. Quiet, calm, and efficient. The soft-spoken one.
It's not for me to inquire why you're here. What business you're about, Mr. Dollar, and I don't. But I'm certain it's for the good. And any help that we can give you, you're welcome, sir.
And I say the devil with all this chitter and chatter when there's fish at sea for you to catch, you lazy lunkers. Get up from that table and get to work. By the time the sun's up, the fish will all be out of your reach.
Within a few minutes, we cast off, and the Lily Ann put to sea. Slowly, the lights of the little village disappeared aft. The moon had gone down, and our only company out on the dark water was the twinkling stars and the occasional running lights from the other boats setting out for the fishing banks. Captain Billy Morgan stood at the wheel. Montgomery sat athwart the engine cover and occasionally made some slight adjustment or indicated a change of throttle to the captain. Young Charlie and Ole made ready the 2 small boats and trot lines. For today, we'd go for codfish in the deep that lay along the edge of Taylor Banks. I stood alone up in the bows, looking over the curling wash as it scattered the myriad microscopic beings and gave a soft phosphorescent glow to the water gliding past. And I wondered why there had to be trouble in this world, where honest labor by honest men could do so much more. Honest men? No, not even among this crew. One of them had to be the man who'd attacked me. Was probably the one who had threatened to burn Meg McCarthy out of business. So, I'd better have it. I'd better get back aft, talk with them, watch their every move, try somehow to trap one of them into saying something that would give them away. Or maybe, who knows, give all of them away. And above all, watch my step. There was a long way back to shore. And the darkness and the sound of the engines could all too easily cover up an untoward act by one of them. It did. Before I could lift my head, a powerful pair of arms had picked me up bodily and dropped me overside. In the brief moment that I remember, I felt the strong tug from the big propellers as the water closed over me. Then a terrible blow against my side. Then nothing.
Now, here's our star to tell you about tomorrow's episode of this week's story.
Tomorrow, the motives for arson and murder begin to take definite shape in the form of a confession. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. It is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone, who also wrote this week's story. Be sure to join us tomorrow night, same time and station, for the next exciting episode of Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Roy Rowan speaking. From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
Dr. Lionel Champion here, Mr. Dollar.
Who?
I'm surprised Meg McCarty didn't answer. I ordered her to keep you in bed there at her place until I could see you again.
I am in bed. And I take it you're the doctor who bandaged me up this way, put on this splint.
That's right.
After I tangled with the propeller of Captain Morgan's fishing boat this morning.
Yes, only it was yesterday.
Huh?
You were unconscious when the captain and his men brought you in. After treating you, I gave you sedation.
Oh.
Rest was the most important thing. How did you ever happen to fall off that boat?
Fall? Doctor, I was pushed.
Tonight, and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar, location Cod Harbor, Massachusetts, to the Intercoastal Maritime and Life Insurance Company, Boston. Assignment, the Meg's Palace Matter. Report and expense account continued. As soon as I hung up on Dr. Champion, I again checked the splint on my right leg and confirmed the suspicion that I couldn't possibly walk on it. Then, a few minutes later, Meg McCarthy came into my room. She carried a tray filled with enough food to choke a horse. And while I piled into it, she brought me up to date.
It's in Barnesboro that Dr. Champion has his office. And lucky it was for you he happened to be here in Cod Harbor on his weekly visit. Oh, you were a sorry-looking mess when the men brought you in.
Yesterday, the doctor said.
You've been out as cold as a codfish ever since. But I can tell by the looks that the rest has done a lot for you. How do you feel?
No, matter of fact, Meg, I feel pretty good.
There, you see, you've got to take it easy, like the doctor said. Just lay there and rest and sleep and eat all the good food I bring you.
Yeah, Except and unless I get up and going on this case.
You try that and I'll lash you to the bedpost. Doctor's orders is doctor's orders, so don't you try nothing different.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, it's a miracle, praise be, that propeller on the Lily Ann didn't cut you to ribbons.
Captain Billy and his crew brought me back here.
Who else?
Where are they now?
Fishing out on the banks, of course. What did you expect? Don't you know they have to earn a living the same as me and you? And what about keeping up the payments on that seagoing bathtub? Precious little time they had for fishing yesterday after that fool trick you pulled falling off of her.
Is that what they told you happened?
Of course, what else?
Meg, which of the men told you I'd fallen off the boat?
Well, all of them. Only the first mate, young Charlie Montgomery, the engineer, and, of course, my Willie by himself, Captain Morgan, to you.
And they all told it the same way?
What, why not? Should they be after making up fairy tales?
How did they tell it?
You're sure that screw didn't hit you on the head, too? You lost your memory?
How did they tell it, Meg? It's important.
Well, whilst they went about their chores, you were standing alone up in the bows. Then they heard you yell.
Yeah?
Despite of the darkness, they seen you splash in the phosphorescent wake. And there you were, being sucked under by the prop. That's all.
And they all told it the same?
Exactly the same. Even young Charlie Buttons kept saying it over and over. I saw it all.
Oh?
Well, you know, like he was still struck with the fear of what might have happened to you.
I wonder.
Well, stop wondering and get yourself some more sleep, or the doctor'll have me head. And if he does, I'll take it out on you. And believe me, Johnny boy, that'll be a lot worse than the fool accident of yours ever was.
Meg, listen to me. It was no accident.
What?
I was thrown overboard.
Oh, Johnny boy, you're raving delirious out of your head.
I was leaning over the rail, watching the water, and a powerful pair of arms belonging to somebody aboard that boat picked me up and tossed me over.
Saints... Who?
Ole Jensen, young Charlie Buttons, Montgomery, or Captain Billy himself.
You start raving, Johnny. You must have got hit on the head.
And I'll bet my last buck that whoever did it is the same one who slugged me in the alley, the same one who's threatened to burn you out of this place of yours.
Oh, no.
And the minute I get up out of this bed, Tell me something.
Yes?
Tim Beasley, your police chief and mayor and so on.
Yes?
Has he been up here to see you?
That good-for-nothing blatherskite, no. And what's more, if he shows his ugly face in my establishment, I'll toss him out on his beam ends. But why do you ask?
Because I told him to get the threatening notes from you. Check them against the handwriting of several people here in Cod Harbor.
Who? Like that sniveling cousin of his, Clem Harris, that runs the Silver Plate Cafe?
Yeah, among others.
Well, he ain't been here, and I won't have him here.
I take it you and he don't get along.
Of course we don't.
Why?
Because ever since his cousin Clem has been in business, Tim has threatened to close me up.
For what reason?
For breaking town ordinances on restaurants. The kind he enforces over to Barnesboro.
Well, have you been breaking them?
No more than no less than dear cousin Clem or Tony 14 or Ernie Turner does after their hosh joints. But me, he always is picking on, and why? Because I get most of the business from the fishermen. So you want a suspect in this case, Johnny boy?
You've named them for me, Meg. The other cafe owners.
All right, so I'll give you one. Tim Beasley and Clem Harris working in cahoots. And if it wasn't one of them waylaid you in the alley...
Whoa, wait a minute. Neither of them could have been aboard the Lily Ann.
Then you must have fell.
Oh, Meg, when is the doctor coming to see me?
He should be here by now.
Well, if he doesn't come pretty soon, I'm getting up and going, orders or no orders.
Johnny?
Motives, suspects... Why, Meg McCarthy herself could have rigged this whole thing. Called me in as a cover-up while she burned up her place to collect $15,000 insurance. Even her intended, Captain Billy Morgan, who'd collect her life insurance if she were to die in a fire. Tim Beasley, lazy slob of a general factotum in Cod Harbor, to put Meg's palace out of business on behalf of his cousin, Clem Harris. Or Clem himself. Or one of Captain Billy's crew for some reason I hadn't yet fathomed. Half an hour later, Dr. Champion arrived, looked me over, and then went to work with a pair of bandage shears.
So now we'll take off that splint.
Oh, but if something's broken, Doc.
Not a thing broken, Mr. Dollar. Just an old trick of mine.
Huh?
You needed absolute rest until I could see you again. And from what I've heard about you, you wouldn't have taken it unless I fooled you into it. And that was the sole reason for the splint.
Doc, you're a wonder.
There we are. And in view of your surprisingly good condition, I'd say you may be up and around as soon as you honestly feel able. Say, even tomorrow, perhaps.
Item 8, $10 for medical services. All that Dr. Champion would accept. Needless to say, as soon as he left, I planned to get up and get to work. But as he walked out the door, Meg brought Captain Billy in to visit and sympathize. So, in hope of keeping him off guard, I played real sick. Then Ole and Montgomery came in, too. But I needed to get these men alone, and I must admit be feeling better than I did. And then I realized that young Charlie hadn't come. I asked about him.
To Burnsboro, Johnny said as long as the doctor was keeping you in bed 2 or 3 days, he could see you when he gets back.
But wait a minute.
He went to pick up some supplies for Meg here like he always does. Gives him a chance to drop in on his sister where he keeps his Sunday clothes and things.
He wasn't out on the boat with you today?
Meg spoils the lad that way, always has him going in for supplies when I need him the most.
Look here now, Willie boy. You talk like I was the one picked today.
Well, of course you did. You always do.
Of course I didn't, and don't you tell me. He said it was you.
You're off your course, Mr. McCarthy. You know blasted well that you are.
And don't you shake your finger at me, you blue
You pipe down, woman. Do you want Mr. Dollar to have a relapse?
You... Oh, Johnny boy. I'm sorry. Shut up, Bill.
It's okay, Meg.
And
But tell me
Willie boy. I'm sorry if I seem to be raising my voice at you.
Oh, bless you, Meg. It's that fiery spirit that keeps me loving you. But now, why don't we leave the poor man alone to recover, huh? Come on, boys.
Yes, come on, all of you. Out you go.
After you, Meg.
Oh,
After
my,
you.
how polite we are.
Montgomery, wait.
Oh, Mr. Dollar, something I can do for you to ease your bed of pain? A little drink or something? I've a bottle aboard the Lily Ann.
No, thanks. I want to talk to you about Charlie.
A real fine lad he is. Now, I'm sure he'll be wanting to see you when he gets back from his visit in town.
No, wait. Captain Morgan said he has a sister in Barnesboro. Do you know the address?
Oh, that I do. Many's a fine meal we've had from her on our time off.
Well, I want to see her. You know, just a little personal thing.
Oh, then here, I'll write down the address for you. She lives in a pretty little house on the corner of Rose.
Maybe Montgomery was the wrong one to ask. I don't know. But I had to gamble somewhere along the line. And if my suspicions about Charlie Buttons was right, I hoped I wouldn't be too late. When Montgomery had left, I sneaked out the back door to avoid Meg and hurried over to Tim Beasley's office in the shack that functioned as Cod Harbor City Hall. He wasn't there. A woman who lived next door informed me he'd taken off in a hurry to Barnesboro. So Beasley had gone to town after Charlie. Or had he? For $25, that's item 9, I rented a creaky old truck and headed for Barnesboro. Charlie's sister's house was on a gravel road out on the edge of town. There was no other car there, so I stopped in front of the place, got out, and walked up to the front door.
Sorry, mister, but my sister... Mr. Dollar.
Hello, Charlie.
Yeah, I meant to say, why didn't you come in? Sure glad to see you're all right, Mr. Dollar.
Are you?
That sure was awful. You're falling off the boat that way.
What's the matter, Charlie? Aren't you feeling good?
Yeah, sure. Sure I am.
You look a little pale. And say... Well... Packing up to leave, huh?
Yeah, Well, I'm tired of the fishing business, Mr. Dollar. Gonna give it up. Go somewhere else to earn a living. Tired of it, yeah.
Why did you do it, Charlie?
Huh? I don't know what you mean.
It took somebody who knew that boat pretty well to sneak up on me in the dark and push me overboard. Took a strong, young pair of arms to do it, too. Yours, weren't they? Well...
I didn't want to do it, Mr. Dollar. So help me, I didn't want to. But he made me.
Yeah? Who made you?
He found out. He found out about me, about my record.
What record?
That I'd killed a man once, accidentally, when I was just a kid. I'd run out and escaped from the reformatory. But now I'm grown. If they ever catch me, they'll hang me or the electric chair up for life, and he knew that.
Charlie.
If I didn't do anything he said, like slugging you or trying to start the fires or anything, he'd give me away. So I had to, don't you see? I couldn't help myself. He made me do everything.
Charlie, who, Charlie, who?
It's all right. You don't need to rough me up, Dollar. I knew I'd get caught up with someday. I'll go quiet with you. And maybe you'll help to try and get things easy for me.
Charlie, who made you try to kill me?
Yeah, I'll tell you. It was so he could get you out of the way and burn up Meg's palace and her with it. I'll tell you, Mr. Dollar, it was... Oh, no.
Huh?
There. At the window. Behind you.
That old trick? Oh, no, you...
Help!
The boy fell against me, pinning me to the floor. And as I pushed him away, I saw the patch of red slowly spreading on the front of his shirt directly above the heart. By the time I got to the window, a car had taken off down the old gravel road and was completely obscured by a thick cloud of dust. And I wondered for whom the shot that killed Charlie had really been intended.
Now, here's our star to tell you about the final episode of this week's story.
Tomorrow, a killer strikes again. But one of his victims rises from the grave to strike back. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. It is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone, who also wrote this week's story. Be sure to join us tomorrow night, same time and station, for the next exciting episode of Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Roy Rowan speaking. From Hollywood, it's time now for...
Johnny Dollar.
This is Chief Walters, Barnesboro Police. You call me?
Oh, yeah, Chief.
I understand you're out at Sally Button's place on the edge of town. What can I do for you?
Better get out here, Chief, fast.
Oh?
Yeah, to pick up a body.
Tonight, and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. From Special Investigator Johnny Dollar, location Cod Harbor, Massachusetts, to the Intercoastal Maritime and Life Insurance Company, Boston. Assignment, the Meg's Palace Matter. Report and expense account continued. Whoever shot young Charlie Buttons there at his sister's home in Barnesboro had disappeared down the gravel road in a cloud of dust. Hence the call to the police. Chief Walters was in his late 30s and definitely on the ball. He made a quick call to the coroner, and then in his car we took off for Cod Harbor.
We pretty much left him alone over there in Cod Harbor, Mr. Dollar, and so far they've always managed to keep the peace. This time...
Yeah. Now listen, Chief, and I'll give it to you fast.
Yes, do that.
Meg McCarthy got some threats to burn her place down, notified the insurance company. They sent me out.
Understandable.
First night there, I spotted a prowler around the cafe. But before I could get to him, somebody slugged me from behind.
You didn't know who?
Not then, but the prowler turned out to be Tim Beasley, your deputy over there, I guess you call him.
Sort of, self-appointed. Lazy lot. But didn't he know who slugged you?
He said not.
Was Meg herself there? She has a powerful right, Dollar.
Yeah, I thought of that, too, but let me go on now. The next morning, I went out on the Lily Ann, got tossed overboard. And believe me, Chief, the propeller on one of those boats isn't much fun to tangle with.
Yes, Dr. Champion told me he'd had to go over to fix you up.
Yeah. Anyhow, I was sure that whoever was after me was a member of that crew. Had to be.
I see.
When I came to back at Meg's, I had visitors. The crew, loaded with sympathy. The crew, that is, except for Charlie Buttons.
And that's why you traced him to his sister's house?
Uh-huh. And, Chief, he confessed.
Then I don't understand.
What? He said he was forced to do those things by somebody who knew of his criminal record and was holding it over his head.
Criminal record? Charlie Buttons?
Yeah, it seems he killed a man once when he was just a kid. The point is, this other person threatened to expose Charlie unless Charlie did his bidding. So Charlie, not being very bright, didn't think he had a chance.
You find out who this other person is?
No. That's when somebody shoved a gun through the window and back of me, shot him, then took off in the proverbial cloud of dust.
How are you doing on suspects?
Oh, brother, too many. Meg, of course, named her rivals in the cafe business right from the beginning.
Well, I wouldn't count them very good suspects.
Then there's Captain Billy Morgan, her intended husband.
What a pair. And if I know Captain Billy, he was just scrounging a lot of free meals. Say, incidentally, I saw him in Barnesburg just before you called.
Well, Captain Billy is beneficiary of Meg's life policy. And he still owes a lot of dough in the Lily Ann, I understand.
Who else?
Tim Beasley.
What?
Yeah.
Look, Dollar, I know he's a good-for-nothing bum who's taken that job of acting mayor, acting police chief, acting everything else so he can live off the fat of the land over there.
Did you also know that Clem Harris, who runs the other big cafe, is his cousin?
His cousin, huh?
Oh, and Beasley never kept his promise to dig up the threatening notes Meg received and compare them with the handwriting of the others.
Doesn't look good, does it?
What do you think, Chief?
I'm beginning to wonder if Tim Beasley will be there when we get to Cod Harbor.
As it turned out, Tim Beasley was very much in evidence. So was the whole population of Cod Harbor. For as the lights of the little fishing village slowly hove into view, I saw another light down by the waterfront, or rather a big reddish glow. And as we pulled in closer, we could see the long tongues of flame leaping upward that caused it. Yep, Meg's palace was on fire. Chief Walters stepped on it. We took the last few turns on two wheels. Hoses of all sorts and shapes and sizes connected to pumps aboard the nearby fishing boats were throwing powerful streams of water at Meg's palace, at the back where the fire had apparently started. But the flames continued to spread, even licking along the ground behind the building.
That means arson, Johnny. Oil and gasoline spreading around back there.
No doubt of it, Chief. How'd it start, Captain Billy?
Who knows? But grab a hose and get to work. Get some hose off one of them boats. Don't go real crazy for it.
Captain Billy Morgan was running the show, and every one of my prize suspects was in there working his head off. All of them taking orders from Captain Billy. And then I realized that Meg McCarthy was nowhere around, and I noticed something else. All the firefighting was directed toward the back of the building. The front, thanks to the wind, was untouched. But that's where Meg McCarthy's room was. Chief Walters.
Hey, Johnny, where are you going?
Come on, Chief, give me a hand.
What?
See that window up there? Well, I'm going to climb up on the front roof of the place.
You'll burn to a crisp up there.
Got to take that chance, because I think I can blow this whole case wide open. Now, clench your hand so I can step on them and hoist me up.
But even right here, the heat is
Come
too
on,
much.
man, quick, come on.
Okay, Johnny, but I think you're crazy. Here you are. Now, up. Here you go.
The heat was almost unbearable up on that roof. But I knew I had to do it. I crawled low along the shingles, hoping the rotten old roof would hold. When a withering blast that felt like fire itself hit me full in the face as I broke the window of Meg's room. And there she lay, stretched out, unconscious on her bed. There was an ugly livid mark across her forehead where somebody had struck her down, then left her there at the mercy of the fire.
Johnny! Valerie, all right?
The searing heat seemed to press in on me, engulf me. And the open window gave a draft to the flames that were already licking at the sides of the open door. Somehow I managed to wrap a blanket around Meg, covering her face, and stagger to the window, blindly groping for it.
Johnny! This way, the window! Keep that hose on us here!
All right, Johnny. You're all right now. I got you. It's all right, boy. It's all right.
It's all right, Johnny boy. Outside of having your hair singed and losing a suit of clothes, you're all okay.
Well, thank goodness you are, Meg. But tell me...
Oh, now take it easy. You got a bad burn on that left arm, and you got to lie still.
Yeah,
and would you believe it was Clem Harris, the one I always thought was such a no-good blatherskite that gave us each a place to stay here at this house.
I wondered where I was when I came to a few minutes ago.
I guess I misjudged the man.
But how about you, Meg?
Oh, bless you, darling. You saved me life, and I'll never forget it. May the good Lord strike me down. If it hadn't have been for you... Oh, think of it, Johnny boy. I'd be laying still in that pile of ashes out there that was once me nice cafe. I love you, Johnny boy, and I'm humble and I'm grateful.
Meg, that mark on your head.
Oh, the dirty, blathering spalpeen who snuck up in me room and knocked me down and left me there. I'll murder him when I find him, that dirty conniving.
You don't know who it was?
How could I when he snuck up from behind me? Oh, Chief Waters, come in, sir, come in.
Well, I must say, you two look pretty good, considering. Ready for a visitor, Johnny?
Yeah, hi, Chief. Bring him in.
Oh, now, Johnny, are you sure you want visitors until you're feeling better?
Bring him in, boys. Right in here.
Stop your pushing.
Come on, get
Oh, Billy boy. What's the matter with you, Willie? That look on your face. Oh, and you, Chief Waters. What was the idea of locking up my Willie boy like some dirty scoundrel of a crook when he tried so hard to save my cafe from that awful fire? Who do you think you are?
All right, Meg, simmer down.
Don't
simmer
you talk
down.
to me like that, you young
Meg.
whisker snap. Yes, darling.
Well, I won't simmer down. What was the big idea arresting me that way? Who do you think you are around here? And I'm talking to you, Dollar.
You went too far, Captain Billy.
I went too far. You're off your course. What are you talking about?
Yes, Johnny boy, if you was responsible...
Quiet, Meg.
Yes, sir.
I'm talking about arson, Captain Billy. And murder. And the motives behind them.
What?
Motives. They were all over the place by half a dozen people. But yours was the strongest. By far.
You're off your head.
The $25,000 insurance on Meg's life. That was the
Why,
big
you...
one.
Let me at him.
No, just a minute. You take your hand
Take
off
it
of
easy,
him.
Meg, or I'll have to order you out.
But listen, what he's saying is that Captain Billy was...
Quiet!
Yeah, let me finish this, will you, Meg? Played lover boy to her, didn't you, Captain Billy? To make sure you'd be her beneficiary.
You're crazy, you dirty...
It looked like you right from the first, but I couldn't be sure until I compared the writing on the threatening letters with some of your handwriting I found.
Oh, no.
So that's the way you found out, you dirty underhanded...
Yeah, Captain, that's right. Threatening letters. To make it look like somebody else was out to get her competitors, for instance. And to leave the way clear for you.
Willie boy.
No, I didn't. I mean, I didn't mean to...
Oh, no, Willie. Tell me it ain't true.
Don't touch me.
Oh.
Why, Billy? Why'd you do it?
I had to. I had to have the money or I'd lose my...
What? You mean your boat was more to you?
Go on, Billy, and quiet, Meg.
Fishing. Fishing was my whole life. I had to save my boat. I had to get the money for it. How else could I ever...
Rotten
No.
business.
No,
You would. Let me... I don't know, Johnny boy. Maybe I'll move to someplace else and open up. I wouldn't have the heart to here. Cod Harbor, it'd be too. It was here that I met him and I believed him. And... Well, I guess this old heart of mine wasn't as tough as I thought it was.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Meg.
I'll get over it. Sure I will. I'm Meg McCarthy, Johnny Dollar. No blathering idiot of a man is going to keep Meg McCarthy down.
That's the...
You hear me? No man on this whole earth is worth it. They're all of them just a bunch of no good, too tight. Oh, no. No, Johnny boy, not you. If only there was more of the likes of you in the world. I love you, Johnny boy. And if I were a bit younger and maybe pretty... Johnny.
Yeah?
Now tell me, where did you ever get the threat letters you compared the writing of? I'd have swore that I destroyed them, every one.
Know something, Meg? I didn't.
Huh?
I never saw them. Never saw a sample of Captain Billy Morgan's writing either.
You mean you... Oh, no. Huh?
Well, it worked, didn't it?
Aye. And it serves that conniving murder and blather squatching...
There now, Meg.
Oh, Johnny. I'm afraid I really did love him.
Yeah, it had been a long shot. And thank goodness it had paid off. The courts will take care of Captain Billy. The insurance on her place, of course, will have to be paid to Mink McCarthy. But no life insurance, thank heaven. Oh, poor Mink. It'll be a long, long time before she'll fall for sweet talk again. Expense account totaled, including fare and incidentals, back to Hartford, $221.60. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Now, here's our star to tell you about next week's story.
Next week, well, they say that diamonds are a girl's best friend. But I wonder, when they're a motive for murder. Join us, won't you? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, starring Bob Bailey, is transcribed in Hollywood. It is produced and directed by Jack Johnstone, who also wrote this week's story. Heard in our cast were Virginia Gregg, Jack Crucian, Byron Kane, Forrest Lewis, Bert Holland, Stan Jones, Bob Bruce, Austin Green, and Harry Bartell. Musical supervision by Amerigo Marino and Carl Fortina. Be sure to join us on Monday night, same time and station, for another exciting story of yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Roy Rowan speaking.